Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Every day spring brought new surprises, but these unexpected gifts pleased and filled the heart with some kind of anticipation of happiness. Sophia, too, felt a pleasant excitement, a warmth crumbling inside. Sliding the curtains open, she opened the window and soaked in the spring scents. The air rushed into the spaciousness of the kitchen. The woman put her face up to that same ceiling and whispered, "God, it felt good." It's not for nothing they say that spring awakens the desire to live. Sophia squared his shoulders. Romance, a useful thing, but not for me. And all because for me life has long ago acquired the format of duty. The woman put the kettle on the stove and headed for the refrigerator. Footsteps sounded in the hallway, and she froze for a second from surprise. Then she said very loudly to Greg, "You almost gave your mother a heart attack. You could have sounded the alarm." I'd forgotten I had tenants. Greg's face was still wandering. Shadows flashed in their dreams, and so he smiled stupidly. "Okay, Mom, I'm going to buy a doobie of the Children's World today. And every morning before leaving the room I will remind you that you are not alone in this apartment." The young man said the last phrase like an orator completing his morning speech with vivid facial expressions and gestures. Sophia shook her head disapprovingly. "Stop clowning around. You'll be 35 soon, and you're acting like a boy. You need to settle down." "Mom, it's a trait that almost all men have. I'm talking about a tendency to do childish things. But you women don't understand that such inappropriate behavior hides courage, willingness to sacrifice, and Sophia laughed. "I get it. Your oratorical skills are good, but your vocabulary is suffering. Let's wake up your half. We'll have breakfast. Kettle's almost ready. I just have to make the sandwiches." At that moment, the kettle sounded, and the woman rushed to the stove. She didn't see her son's face contorted in a grimace of confusion. There was a long pause, and the mother turned around. "Are we fighting again?" Greg waved his arms vigorously. "No, Mommy. Molly and I are doing just fine. It's just that my wife had a little accident, and you came in late, so I didn't bother you." Sophia carefully put the kettle on for comfort. "What kind of trouble are you talking about?" Greg nervously chuckled, which was clearly not in keeping with the nature of the message. "Molly had a sudden stomachache last night. Yes, so badly that she had to call an ambulance." The woman's face turned pale, and she sank to the edge of the stylish sofa that threatened the kitchen decor. "Tell me it's something serious." She didn't happen to be in a position. Greg, I didn't expect such a reaction, and got really worried. "Mom, it's all right. We also at first thought that something, but this version immediately dropped out. So you can relax. There's nothing wrong with your sister-in-law. It's a simple appendix. She even had surgery." The mention of surgery only made Sophia's condition worse. She was panting and tears came to her eyes. "Did you call a hospital? Is it that serious?" "Mom, don't worry. The danger is over. I was up early this morning, checking on my lovely wife's health. She was operated on at 300 hours, so don't blame me for being callous." I'm sweating with excitement. "You interrogated me like I was on trial." Mothers-in-law don't usually worry about their daughters-in-law. Greg exhaled with a sense of accomplishment and headed for the fridge. "So we have that to stress over." The mother beat her son to the table. "Sit down at the table. I'll do the cooking. I have to clean up after every time you go to the fridge." Greg didn't argue and sat down at the table. "Mom, I have such a vicious appetite, probably from nerves. I was really scared when Molly got sick. I'd never been in a situation like that before." Sophia gave her son a fleeting glance. "It was a situation like that. Greg, you just forgot." Greg felt himself being burned from the inside out. His mother's words sounded reproachful, a reminder of a long-standing family tragedy, to enter now into a bickering stand that without exaggeration depended on his future. His well-being he didn't want. So the best thing an adult son could do in the situation was to switch to another topic. Greg had often used this method in his childhood, and he was eager to use it now as well. "Mammy, I've been meaning to ask you for a long time, but I haven't had the chance. Maybe you could move in with us. It's hard to run a serious business away from civilization, and not quite convenient. We have a spacious apartment for 2 people with a lot of square meters. Soon the renovation will be finished, and it will be even cozier. So think about my proposal." Sophia figured out her son's maneuvers, but she also did not want to spoil her mood in the morning. She only noticed as a victim. "You think you're going to get your mother by turning the tables? It's not gonna work. I can guess your plans by your breath." The woman quickly cleared the dishes off the table. "I've been talking about moving for a long time. I'm quite comfortable in Castle Pines, and in modern conditions you can do business from anywhere in the world, even from the North Pole." Greg passed by, not forgetting to imprint a kiss on his mother's cheek. Already from the hallway, he shouted cheerfully, "Mom, Molly in the second surgery in Ward 6. If you go, she'll bring slippers and a robe, and I'll drop by in the evening. Greg should probably bring something to eat." Greg reappeared in the cramped space of the anteroom as a humorist. The tenants themselves called the space between the hallway and the kitchen. "Mom, what are you doing? You can't eat at all after abdominal surgery. I think you can drink. You can't eat. All right, I'm off." After all, the son of the head of the company should be a role model. Sophia, as if remembering something important, made an expressive gesture. "Greg, hang on. This news about Molly's illness has completely knocked me off my game, and I forgot to warn you that from today, we will buy all consumables and fittings through a tender." "Okay, Mom. I ordered my lazy men to prepare the documents and inform the partners about the changes." The head of the company interrupted her son. "No, you take care of your direct duties, and this case I entrusted to someone else. Kevin has a wealth of experience and has a special nose for shoddy products." Greg was caught off guard because he didn't expect his mother to be so set up. An angry grimace contorted his face. "I get it. You don't have to explain. But you're counting my ego. You don't tell me that." In a burst of not-so-good feelings, the man kicked his indoor slippers, and they flew into the living room. Sophia came close to him and looked into his eyes. But it was no longer the warm gaze of a loving mother, but the cold gaze of a successful businesswoman. "You need to temper your ardor. Be thankful that I noticed the case with the past deliveries, which almost cost us our reputation." Greg instantly shrank back, and his shoulders slumped. His mother's authoritative voice as a child had suppressed his desire to resist. He couldn't forgive himself for this weakness, but he couldn't overcome it either. Sophia understood her son's state of mind. "I don't know, Greg, what prompted you to contact this dubious supplier, which is Cleopatra's firm. But I have no right to take risks. We're talking about dozens of people who work for a company that employs people with disabilities. We have a number of benefits, and I cannot allow myself or anyone else to cheat these people, to deprive them of their present and future. That's why I've made this decision. But you shouldn't take offense at me. It's best to learn from Kevin. He knows how to find an approach to even the most uncooperative partners." "Greg, Mom's boiling. Your Kevin's the biggest crook in the world, isn't he? There's no place to brand him." Sophia grinned. "Such people are called enterprising. They are very useful in business, and I strongly advise you to get Kevin's good attitude." "Mom, you're the one who just half an hour ago reminded me of my adulthood. I'm sorry, but I don't want to take lessons from your Kevin. What if he's such a great employee? It's time we put a bronze bust of him in front of our office in gold and right." The woman laughed. "Stop clowning around. I repeat, do not take offense at me. I'm doing this for your own good." Greg said nothing, but thought with irritation that his mother was again trying to create a harmonious duet. She had never spoken of him as an individual, and it was this fact that had once served to form a pile of complexes that still interfered with his life. The counterbalance used to be the half-sister, but now Molly has taken the place of the mother's favorite. The sprouts of his mother's jealousy of her own wife began to sprout in Greg's heart. Not long ago, the man realized that it would lead to nothing good, but he hadn't been able to suppress that stupid feeling yet. If Sophia had been told 5 years ago that the appearance of a provincial girl in her house would completely change her own life, she would not have believed in such statements, but further forced her mother-in-law to look at past events and current problems in a new way. The most positive moment for the mother was that the daughter-in-law taught her son to treat life with care. After all, Greg's bachelorhood had exceeded all permissible limits, and his mother often reproached him. "Greg, can't you find a nice girl? All you do is look and talk. That's how you get to gray hairs." My son was amused by such conversations, and he provoked his mother on purpose. "Mom, this image suits me fine. No obligations, you're only responsible for yourself. Life's a rush, but it's not normal. A grown man shouldn't be like a creature who is not responsible for anything." "Mom, that's your personal opinion. I have a different view, and I think it's the greatest folly for a man to voluntarily put a stigma around his neck. If you think like that, you'll be alone in your old age. Mom, you're my role model. You're single too, but I don't see any signs that you're suffering. Don't compare me to yourself. Besides, I've been married twice, as my grandmother used to say." Oh, by the way, my grandmother. Too bad you didn't get to see her. She knew all kinds of customs. She told me that in the old days they used to hang a heavy deck around their necks on Shrovetide. Greg was natively impressed by this custom. Medieval savagery. Everyone had their own opinion, but still this conversation influenced Greg, and he soon met a girl with whom he started a strong relationship. For almost 2 years, Greg and Cindy lived in a common-law marriage. Sophia hid from acquaintances that her son was cohabiting, but the young couple was not the least bit embarrassed. On the contrary, they liked free relations, and on occasion they tried to emphasize the advantages of such a union. Cindy said about it approximately as the world is changing, and a person must also fight with outdated stereotypes. Personally, I treat marriage as an unnecessary formality, although Sophia did not agree with this attitude. She tried not to interfere in the relations of the young. Cindy was from a good family, and at first she even made a positive impression on Greg's mother. But once during a frank conversation with the future mother-in-law, the girl revealed her essence, saying that the husband is a man who is obliged to fulfill any whim of his woman. Sophia was horrified by Cindy. What about love? After all, it is impossible to create something lasting without this feeling. The girl looked at her boyfriend's mother and calmly replied, "Love, carrots, and other tenderness. It's all utopia. No one needs a vestige. I told you that relations between people in modern society are now built on other principles, no matter how much the woman asked." Cindy couldn't name those principles. Sophia hoped in her heart that a union based on these incomprehensible norms would not last long. Her premonition was justified. One day, Greg came to her early in the morning and after a short greeting asked, "You won't mind if I stay with you for a week, will you?" Not a muscle in his mother's face quivered, although she guessed the reason for the sudden visit. The woman said very calmly that she might not have asked. "This is your home, and you can come here at any time of the day or night." The son hugged his mother in a burst of sincere feelings. How nice it is to have a person who understands everything without any unnecessary words. Sophia did not go into her son's soul and waited for him to tell her the reason for his separation from Cindy. "Mom, you won't believe it, but I've thought of you so often. I wanted to give it up so badly before, but I did. I don't know why I had to make such sacrifices. You can't build anything without patience, son. And for family life, that ability is essential. So why did you two split up?" "Mom, it's simple. In backyard parlance, I was elementary. Every day, she had a new dream. And for some reason, it was me who was chosen to fulfill those wishes. For a long time, I tried to convince myself that this was a temporary phenomenon. But then I realized that in the view of Laika, any man is a walking ATM or faker, able to make money out of thin air." Sophia's reasoning seemed sensible. She was even glad that her son decided to part with Cindy. The woman continued to believe that Greg would meet a girl with whom he could build a strong family. But after the separation from Cindy, the young man began to lead a dissolute life. He rented an apartment in the regional center, in which almost every day arranged noisy parties. The mother heard rumors about what the son does in his spare time, but she understood perfectly well that it was useless to reprimand a grown man. Only once she couldn't stand it and said with undisguised regret, "Greg, of course you're free to dispose of your life as you wish, but remember that one day there will come a moment when you will be, as a famous writer said, painfully hurt for the aimlessly lived days." Greg grinned wryly. "Mom, did you hit the mark? I've been feeling that way for a long time." "Then I don't understand why you don't try to change things." The young man sighed heavily. "It's easier to go with the flow, and I'm used to it." His son's frank confession shocked his mother, but she realized that she could not change his mind. The woman thought for a long time about how she could help Greg, and one day on a hunch, she went to the local temple. Sophia did not know any prayers and turned to the Mother of God with the words that were bursting from her heart. "The Queen of Heaven will intercede. Help my son. Nastasia him on the right path. I appeal to you as a loving mother worried about her child. Do not refuse your mercy." Sophia whispered the words of the prayer. Tears rolled from her eyes. An unfamiliar old woman watched her for a while, and then came closer. "Pray, my dear. Sincere words will be heard and will not go unanswered." The woman looked at the old woman, who reminded her of her long-dead grandmother. "Thank you." She leisurely walked from the church. She heart developed, pleasant grace, inner voice encouraging, and whispered, "Sophie, everything will be fine." And again she remembered her grandmother, who always used that form of her name. The woman considered it a sign from above, because the grandmother was a very religious person. The next day, Sophia again prayed in the temple in front of the images of yesterday's old woman and did not meet her again. Surprisingly, but visits to the place of spiritual solace became regular. And every time after prayer, the woman did not forget to leave some money for the needs of the temple. Perhaps her appeal was heard in heaven, or was it a coincidence? But Greg's life changed abruptly. One day, he arrived at Castle Pines unannounced, along with a petite blonde. In a solemn voice, he announced, "Mother, receiving guests. This is Molly through the walls." My fiancé Greg all glowed, and the mother realized that her son at this minute very happy. Molly looked at him with admiration, but was silent the whole time. Sophia was charmed by this lovely girl from the first minute. She began to fuss around her guest, trying to anticipate her every wish. "Molly, come in, make yourself at home." "Greg, what are you standing there for?" Greg was pleased that her mother was making such a big fuss over the girl. He expected a slightly different reception, and was very surprised by the warmth and even tenderness that flowed from his always strict mother. Having got a convenient moment, the young man whispered, "Mom, you do not recognize you today. You are on a roll." Sophia threw a reproachful look at her son. "How do you think I should behave to pounce on the girl with questions?" "No, Mom, keep it that way. I can see that my Molly is in shock. She's not used to this kind of attention." The guests really felt awkward the first night and acted very stiff. At every question, she blushed and lowered her eyes. So Sophia decided not to embarrass the girl and to postpone the clarification of biographical data to a more favorable time. After dinner, the son approached his mother and whispered in her ear, "Mom, if you can make a bed even in Kelly's room." The woman looked at her son with surprise. "Aren't you from your mom?" Molly was brought up in the old traditions, so to speak. She wants to take things step by step in our relationship. So you decided to play along. "No, Mom, it's not a game. It's more about not insulting someone I care about." Molly is an amazing creature. She's ethereal. I confess that it gives me great pleasure just to be near her, to look into her bottomless Greg eyes. I think you've fallen in love for real. A mother's heart sing with happiness. "Sophia, I really wanted this shy girl, who didn't have a single gram of makeup on her face, to really feel comfortable in their apartment. She herself walked her into a room that had been empty for almost 10 years. Settle them further and feel free to contact me if there are any difficulties. Suddenly, the girl snuggled up to her for a moment. Are you two so alike? The girl said it with such sadness that Sophia realized that there had been a tragedy in the family of her son's naming just recently. She was afraid of hurting the girl and did not question her, but even herself spoke briefly about a personal misfortune. Mom died last year. She was never sick. Even colds avoided her. And then she felt so bad she couldn't get out of bed. My sister and I thought she had an infection, so we called the doctor and he said it was very bad. I guess the fresh wound hadn't healed yet, and Molly's voice trembled. Sophia hugged her. If it hurts, try not to remember. The girl burst into tears on the chest of her future mother-in-law. I try not to think, but I can't. Mom is always in front of my eyes. Everything happened so fast. In just 2 months, the disease ate her up. It's been over a year now, and we still can't get over it. And Dad still can't believe Mom's gone. They loved each other very much. He says that for him life without Mom is meaningless now. Sophia sat the girl down on the bed and sat next to her. I too suffered a terrible blow many years ago. My youngest daughter was missing. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, even childishly. Yes, Greg told me about the accident, but not in detail. He and I have an unspoken pact not to bring it up. To be more precise, we're at odds about it, and we don't want to make things worse. Greg is certain that Kelly is dead. I know she's alive. A mother's heart can't be deceived. Molly clung to Sophia again. This is your daughter's room. Yes, everything's still here, like it was then, the last night before Kelly disappeared. Lie down, Molly. Let yourself have happy dreams. The woman didn't notice how she'd become more intimate. She kissed her son's friend as she had kissed her youngest daughter before bed. Greg was fiddling in the kitchen. Seeing the mother, he asked with a chuckle, "And what was the secret? Did you cure her?" "Nothing much." Sophia's gaze slid over her son's face and froze somewhere outside the window. "Greg, I'm not a superstitious person, but I don't think it's random. She looks so much like our Kelly." The son saw his mother on the verge of a breakdown, and in a heartbeat, Mom threw herself at him. "We had a deal." The woman smiled embarrassedly and crossed her arms over her chest. Yes, I remember. But it goes to my head. And she's almost that age. And that girl looks alike." Greg raised his voice. "There's no resemblance. Mom, are you trying to convince yourself of that? I thought things had settled down, and you're just stirring things up again." The young man spoke with obvious irritation. He nervously tapped his fingers on the capital, imitating natural stone. Had he known this would be the case and put off meeting Molly? The mother looked directly into her son's eyes, and that look made him wince, as did the woman's words. "Greg, I often catch myself thinking that you don't care at all about your sister. You talk about Kelly as if she were a piece of furniture, not a living person. And that's your sister. I'd hate to think you're so damn close." Greg realized he should say something, but his tongue felt like it was glued to his palate. Sophia looked at him one more time and went to her room. "Don't forget to turn off the kitchen light when you head to bed." The children stayed at Castle Pines for a week. Sophia became very attached to Molly during this time and was happy to tell her the secrets of her favorite homemade recipes. The two women developed a very close relationship almost immediately, which never faltered in 3 years. Molly, at any opportunity, boasted to friends and colleagues at work friendship with her mother-in-law. Sophia is an extraordinary woman. She destroys all the stereotypes that are attributed to mother-in-law. You may not believe me, but she replaced my mother. I'm very grateful to her for that. Representatives of the pessimist clan assured that such attachment is temporary, because any mother will always be on the side of her son. But Greg himself, too, was horrified to notice that his young wife was taking more and more possession of his precious mother's heart every day. The Central District Hospital in Castle Pines was a modern complex, packed with the most advanced equipment. But the main value of the hospital was its personnel. Immediately after its opening, not only medical graduates, but also doctors with rich practical experience rushed here. Every time. Passing by the hospital, Sophia thought if it had appeared in our city 10 years earlier, maybe my mom would still be alive. But as they say, fate cannot be ridden on a horse. And this very fate of a successful businesswoman was not easy. Sophia's childhood was really happy. She was the only child in the family, so the love of her parents and grandmother completely went to her alone. Anthony, the girl's father, worked as a foreman at a construction site. He told his daughter about the cities that would surely grow in the vast country. Sophia listened to her father with her mouth open, and then pelted him with her childish questions. "Daddy, when these cities appear, we will be given a big apartment." In those years, there was an acute shortage of normal housing. Most families stood in line for an apartment for decades, but there was little hope of getting their rightful square meters in their lifetime. So those citizens who had a little more money joined a cooperative. Anthony also decided to use this way of improving his living conditions. He once told his wife and daughter, "Girls, I've been thinking at my leisure and decided that we also need to do something about housing. How long can we stay in this room? Because there's been talk of cooperative housing in the family for a long time." Betty immediately objected. "Anthony, you said yourself that the cooperative is an eternal bondage. We'll be paying for it all our lives." The man looked at his wife enigmatically. "It's okay. We'll get by. I was offered a good position here, which means that I will receive almost twice as much." The woman wouldn't give up. "Anthony, what if something happened to you? God forbid. What are we gonna do then? I don't think we should rush. The coup is moving forward, and in 5 years we'll get an apartment." "Betty, I'm not dreaming. You know very well that it's an almost unattainable goal to get public housing, and 5 years is not 5 years. We'll live in a dormitory until the end of our lives and grow old in this room among the mold-covered walls." The woman wouldn't give up. "We could live at my mom's house." "It's not like that. I've offered you many times, but you're as stubborn as a donkey." Sophia watched the argument between her parents, and at the very moment when her mother mentioned the willful animal, she resolutely took her father's side. "Mom, you said we shouldn't call names. You yourself called Daddy a bad word. I also think we should buy an apartment." The 5-year-old girl so colorfully expressed her opinion that her parents could not resist laughing. When the fit of hilarity passed, Anthony, nodding at his daughter, said to his wife, "And see, Betty, Sophia herself decided everything for us. By the way, contrary to your Philistine beliefs, getting into a cooperative today is not so easy. People have money, and many want to invest their savings in housing." The woman asked with undisguised snideness, "Wondering how you will get in?" The man smiled, "And as a worker in the construction industry, I am entitled to benefits. We're already on the list, and now we have until the end of the month to make the first installment." Betty shook her hands. "Anthony, where are we going to get that kind of money? I wonder what you were thinking when you decided to take this gamble." The man shouted smugly without panic, "We have the money. We'll take it from the amount set aside to buy Anthony's car. But our turn is coming up, and if we get out of line now, we'll have to get in again." Sophia saw that her mother was ready to cry and started to calm her down. "Mommy, don't cry. We'll buy a car later." "Really, Daddy?" The woman looked at her daughter, then at her husband. "Yes, you're conspiring against me. Do what you want, but only then blame yourselves." Anthony gave his face a serious expression. "All Betty. No more tears and recriminations. Let's consider this matter closed. As the head of our small family, I believe that for us today is more important than an apartment, a car. Unfortunately, in our country, personal transportation is still a luxury, not a means of rapid movement." Because the score was not in her favor, Betty had to give up and say goodbye until better times to the dream of buying her own car. But long after the momentous conversation with her husband, she often helped out in the kitchen. Everyone will get free public housing by the year 2000, and we will pay. An act worthy of idiots. Of course, Anthony knew about his wife's sentiments, but pretended not to notice it. And soon Betty herself got used to the idea that they would live in a cooperative apartment and would have to pay for all the fun out of their own pockets. In less than 2 years, the 9-story high-rise was completed, and the family moved into a spacious 3-room apartment. Betty couldn't believe her happiness. My God, here, and the stove, and imported in the bathroom, all to the movie maid. She liked the fancy wallpaper, but what really delighted the woman was the presence of the Anthony Loggia. This is where you can store all the things you can't bear to throw away. The man held up his index finger in mourning. I have to disappoint you, because storing junk is not. By the way, it is considered a violation, and the owners risk a hefty fine. While the parents were arguing about where and what to store in the apartment, Sophia silently surveyed the new space. The girl was amazed by the spaciousness, but what shocked her the most was having her own room. It took her several years to get used to the new conditions, so moving into a new apartment took a central place in Sophia's life. This event became a kind of starting point for all the changes that took place afterwards. But the happiness of the Belsky family was short-lived. When Sophia entered the 7th grade, Anthony was seriously injured at work. For several months, the man lay bedridden in the hospital. In those days, Castle Pines residents were treated in an old building that was in need of major repairs. The conditions there were therefore appalling. Betty stayed with her husband around the clock, and it was only through her efforts that the man regained partial ability to move. Of course, after such a serious injury, it was out of the question to return to the previous place of work. The family hoped that the victim would receive at least some compensation for the damage to his health. But the construction organization, where Anthony worked, refused to admit that the accident occurred because of the negligent attitude to the safety of workers. The management shifted all the blame on the shoulders of the victim. Litigation began, which the man took very hard. He became angry and irritable and began to drink frequently. Betty tried to talk some sense into Anthony. You said yourself that hardship hardens a man, and you gave up without a fight. Betty, look at me. I'm not much of a fighter. I can barely move around the apartment. I don't get much in disability. What the hell kind of toughness is that? It's time to get drunk and forget. Arguments like this happened almost daily. As time went on, so did the financial difficulties. Betty worked her ass off at work, but her meager salary was not even enough for a modest meal, let alone other expenses. One day, she started an uncomfortable conversation. My dears, I've been thinking a lot, and I've come to the conclusion that this apartment is a great luxury for us. Sophia was terrified. Mom, what do you want? Back to the dorm. Why go to such extremes? We can move in with Grandma for a while. No, I won't live in a hut on chicken legs. And how will Daddy be in such conditions? Granny has everything outside, toilet and water. Betty mumbled confusedly. I hadn't thought of that. But there's another option, to exchange our apartment for a smaller one. Anthony had been silent up to that point, but when his wife brought up the exchange, he confidently told Betty to stop. There's not much left to pay off. The woman screamed hysterically at Anthony. We don't have enough to eat, and you keep telling us to wait. If this keeps up, we're gonna die. Betty, don't yell. I'll figure something out, but don't be in a hurry to sell the apartment. Mark my word, that soon will begin such processes that their own home will be the highest measure of security. I was not surprised by such a long monologue of my father, because his disability made him sullen and not talkative. Many times the man made attempts to find a use for his strength, but everything turned out to be a failure. To get out of his chronic lack of money, Betty worked double shifts. The woman would come home and collapse from exhaustion. I don't know how much strength I have left. My life doesn't feel like a normal race. I've seen a motorcyclist at the circus run up the wall. If he suddenly slows down, he'll fall off and get smashed to bits. I feel like I'm in the shoes of such a motorcyclist. Sophia did not pay much attention to such reasoning of her mother, but tried to ease the plight of her parents and often helped her after school in the sewing shop, where Betty had been working for many years, sewing blankets and bed linen. Sophia quickly mastered the technique and often sat behind the car instead of her mother. The women were murmuring behind her back, "Good girl, she's helping her mother, just as long as she doesn't get caught by the bosses." But someone must have snitched. Called Sophia. And the shop steward caught Sophia in the act one day. She hurled insults at her mother. "Betty, what are you doing? You haven't been yourself lately, and I have a suspicion. Have you been drinking with your crippled husband?" Such a statement sounded insulting. But the mother kept silent, lowered her eyes, and clutched her daughter's hand tightly. By this, she made Sophia realize that she should keep silent and bear it. And Sophia at first obeyed her mother's wish, but then she decided to be cunning. She put a subservient smile on her face and turned to the forewoman. "Evelyn, don't scold Mom. It's my fault. I talked her into it. You know I'd love to work for you. I love it here. I'm in awe of machines that do their own work." Sophia was praising the production at every turn, and the boss looked at her, pulling her eyes out. When the girl stopped, Evelyn said with heartfelt awe, "Good girl, we need people like that. You can come when you have free time and desire to learn a profession. And after graduation, I promise you employment." Of course, Sophia didn't earn any money, but her mother received monthly bonuses. So with Sophia's help, the family regained a more or less stable position. And soon Anthony himself, not without the help of friends, found a job. All the years of being on disability, the man practiced hard, and such diligence yielded results. Anthony began to walk a little with the help of a cane. Before that, he moved on crutches and sometimes used a wheelchair. One day, his father came home and happily announced that the girls were hiring me. Betty was surprised. "Who's got the hots for you? They recommended me to a company to guard a warehouse. Work doesn't beat lying down." In honor of such an event, Betty even decided to organize a party in the house. In the evening, when the guests went home, she raised her eyes to the ceiling and quietly said to her daughter Sunny, "God must have heard my prayers. Maybe he'll give us at least a quiet life." Anthony only worked for a couple months. One morning, he didn't come back from duty. On her mother's orders, Sophia ran to the warehouses to see if her father was drinking with his friends again. But the old lady girl found already cocknut father's body. Doctors then said that death came instantly because some vessel exploded. It was a terrible blow, and Betty couldn't take it this time. Working for their pestilence and the death of her husband became a fertile ground for the development of diabetes mellitus. The disease proceeded in a severe form, and by the age of 50, the woman was almost blind. Sophia's grandmother liked to repeat, "If trouble came from the yard and the gate," and prepare to take a lot of misfortunes. As a child, she did not realize the true meaning of this proverb. Only left alone with a pile of problems and a sick mother, the girl felt the meaning of this common phrase. If earlier she still allowed herself to dream about the future, about studying at an institute or at least a professional college, then after the death of her father, all hopes collapsed. Sophia even had to give up the graduation party at school because she had nothing to buy a decent dress and shoes with. The girl received her diploma and the next day went to the garment factory where her mother used to work. Evelyn met her kindly. "Our gold Sophia, how nice to see you. Are you just checking up on us, or are you here on business?" The girl Lipatova on business Evelyn and briefly recounted the essence of her problem. The head of the workshop invited her to her office. "Come, let's talk, because it's too noisy here and there are a lot of extra ears." The last remark the woman made was not in vain. Sophia noticed that her appearance had aroused a lot of interest in the female staff. She followed Evelyn into a small room with a single window. The lady of the room got right down to business. "Of course I'll help you, because your mother has done so much for our enterprise. But I must warn you that perhaps our shop will soon be closed down or sold. There are such talks, but nothing can be fixed, because nobody needs unprofitable enterprises. This is the oil picture. So if you have other options, it is better not to take risks. But Sophia had no such options, and she stayed at the factory until the very end of the existence of this once successful production. They closed the factory just before Christmas, paying the workers a small compensation. Sophia didn't know how to tell her mother that she was out of work, but Betty understood. "Sophia, don't cry. I've known for a long time that our office would be shut down one day. It was coming. Don't despair. We're not going down with you. We'll sell Grandma's house. There are buyers already. We'll see what happens." The money from the sale of this old house in the suburbs was not enough for long, and Castle Pines was in a time of chronic unemployment. Sophia ran for temporary part-time jobs, but the situation was getting worse by the day. Once again, a mother helped with advice. "The daughter will allow Evelyn too. She is kind, always helped everyone, and swore only to maintain authority." Sophia was surprised. "I wonder, and how your former boss will help us." "Oh, you. I'm sick to my stomach. I spend most of my time in my apartment, sitting by the window, and I can still keep up with the events in the country. Haven't you heard that everyone's rushing into cooperatives now? It's a time when you have to seize the moment. A lot of people I know have gone into commerce. What can I say? Strange things are happening around here. Not so long ago, they were kicking out drug dealers, and even gave them jail sentences. But now you can freely sell whatever you want." The girl listened to her mother, but didn't understand what she was getting at. "Mom, what does this have to do with your Evelyn? Because she's had a career change too. Now she goes to Poland or something and brings back fancy things. Talk to her, see if she'd be willing to help." Sophia found the former head of the sewing factory at the market, but the girl did not immediately recognize in the broken but brightly painted saleswoman always pull up Evelyn. She was the first to call out to her. "Sophia, hi. Where you headed? You looking to buy something? Or are you looking for someone?" The girl said, "I'm looking for you, Evelyn." There's a problem with the tone again. A note of concern could be heard in the woman's voice, and Sophia felt uncomfortable. But it was too late to retreat, and she, with a vacantly cheerful net, informed an old acquaintance. "Yes, there is such a thing. I apologize for daring to bother you, but there's no one else to turn to. My mom and I were left with a broken home. We had to sell Grandma's house for next to nothing. But the money was barely enough for a year. There's no work in town, and I can't leave my mom alone. Maybe you can tell me where I can get a job." Evelyn gave the girl an appraising look. "You know what, baby, come to me as my assistant. I'm not really comfortable with the goods, and then stand here. My system is well organized, so there won't be any problems." Sophia, not listening to her benefactor, did not agree. "I'm fine with it. I will do whatever you say." Evelyn shook her head. "You didn't even ask about the salary. That's the most important thing in this business. I don't care, as long as I have enough for my bread. There's enough for bread and even butter and sausage. If you obey me, I'll pay you by the piece. That is, it depends on sales." Since Sophia did not yet have the necessary life experience, she did not go into the intricacies of entrepreneurship. That same day, she and a group of local officials went to Denver to pick up the goods. Before the trip, Evelyn gave Sophia detailed instructions while keeping an eye on the intern, and instructed the driver to make sure there were no hiccups anywhere, and helped the girls. The handsome brunette, and threw Sophia a searing glance in her direction. "Don't worry, Evelyn. I promise everything will be all right." The young man was the owner of the name Leo. He had immediately set his eyes on the pretty assistant of the hostess and entertained her with incredible stories all the way. Sophia did not enjoy the attention of guys at school, so she looked at Leo as a down-to-earth deity. Of course, that first day, she couldn't even guess how her infatuation would end. The young man had helped her stock up on supplies and then loaded the bags into the car himself to learn. With envy watched this scene, one woman did not hold back. "How touching. It reminds me of my youth. Sophia, don't miss out on such a prominent beau." It's rare to find such nice guys these days. The girl is not used to such remarks, and blushed. This moment did not escape Leo. Without paying attention to them, these ladies have been through fire and water. They will still say so much that you will get tired of being surprised. Indeed, all the way back the women told jokes. And at the end, they started telling obscene stories. Sophia did not have to be in such company. And she blushed. Then pale Leo paid absolutely no attention to the obscene talk of the goods and only occasionally winked at the girl. Evelyn was pleased with the assortment of goods Sophia had brought. You're a good girl. Do you have a sense of taste? These people are ready to give everything they have in their wallets for imported rags. That's why the main rule in our business is to please the customer. Sophia caught everything her mistress said on the fly. The girl quickly mastered the peculiarities of market trading, and Evelyn encouraged her to sell even non-liquid goods. The efforts of the novice merchant were positively reflected in the household. The refrigerator was once again stocked with quality products, and Betty was able to receive full treatment. There were changes in Sophia's personal life as well. The joint trips brought the girl closer to Leo, and she accepted his advances with undisguised pleasure. The hostess also noticed that her driver did not leave her assistant. Guided by the best intentions, Evelyn decided to hurry up the young man. Leo, you're acting like an inexperienced boy. Women like determined men. If you walk like a bull and moo, she'll sleepily find another beau. This advice was given publicly, right in the marketplace. Frill-seeking commodities broke up with laughter, and the couple in love did not know where to escape from the attention of everyone. Apparently, in retaliation to the women or because of the desire to prove that he is a real man, immediately without leaving the counter, made Sophia an offer. Quite original in form. Why, Sophia? Marry me. We'll improve the country's demographics together. I don't promise golden mountains, but you won't get bored with me. The humorous tone and inappropriate situation did not embarrass the girl. She immediately agreed to marry a man she knew almost nothing about. Sophia was shocked when her daughter told her the news. Sophia, you can't do that. Marriage is a serious step in every woman's life. You don't know anything about it, Leo. Sophia didn't expect such a reaction from her mother. She started to calm her down. Helen's mom is very nice. He doesn't even smoke and does sports, and I think I love him. Betty cried. She thinks you're not even sure how you feel. How are you going to live your life? Without me, you'll be lost. And then Betty said with childlike naivete, Mom, I'm not going anywhere. We have a big apartment. Helen's renting a room from an old lady, and you don't mind if he moves in with us. Betty reluctantly agreed to a shared living arrangement, but she'd disliked her son-in-law from day one. But he returned the favor, so Sophia often had to play the role of referee during the verbal fights that often took place in the kitchen. One day, when her son-in-law was not at home, Betty said to her daughter Sophia, Can't you see that your husband isn't who he says he is? It's written all over his face, and I know in my heart that your marriage is going to end. Sadly, the girl has a grudge against her mother. Thank you, Mommy, for your good wishes. You're used to thinking only about yourself. That's why you don't like everything I do. After this exchange of revelations, the daughter and mother stopped talking for a long time. Betty thought out a bit. It wasn't until Greg was born that the little grandson became the meaning of life for the sick woman. He, too, rejoiced at the birth of his son and made grand plans for the future. In an optimistic stroke, he promised his wife Sophia, We will soon live like they show in the movies. We will build a 2-story house with a swimming pool, buy a luxury car. She will go to an elite school. Sophia wanted to believe in these bright prospects, but these plans were not destined to come true, because Leo got involved in a dirty story. Sophia remembered that winter day when masked men burst into their apartment and dragged her husband out of bed. The little son was screaming in fright, and the law enforcers, ignoring the children's cries, laid her husband face down on the floor and twisted his hands behind his back. The young woman instinctively rushed to the aid of her beloved with a shout, What are you doing? You are treating him for the time being. but one of the aliens roughly pushed her away. Sophia hit her head painfully against the wall, so she could not hear well how her husband promised her Sophia in parting. "I will definitely come back. You just wait for me." Neighbors watched from the windows as men in camouflage led them Helen with the Hall long back arms to the car. A few days later, rumors spread through the neighborhood that Sophia's husband was involved in the death of a prominent businessman. Acquaintances began to avoid Betty and Sophia, and friends and distant relatives stopped answering their calls. Even Evelyn, embarrassed, once said, "You realize that this is a rather delicate situation. You can't go against public opinion. So you and I are going to have to part ways. There's too much at stake, and I can't risk my reputation. Besides, I'm going to buy a little store in the region." The landlady paid the girl a substantial compensation and made it clear that all relations between them. From that moment on, all relations between them were terminated. Later, Sophia learned that Evelyn had become the owner of a chain of stores selling branded clothes. Helen was given 10 years in a strict regime colony. The young woman did not want to hear about this person anymore and changed her surname to her maiden name. The housing cooperative also had to make new documents. Only the patronymic was left from the native father. Public opinion affected the life of the young woman. She unsuccessfully searched for a permanent job, contenting herself with casual earnings, but the heaviest blow was the death of her mother. Betty's condition deteriorated sharply and required expensive medicines, for which the daughter had no money. Black clouds again thickened over the head of the young woman, and she no longer believed that the sun would again smile on her bright streets. Man is an amazing creature. He gets used to even the most unbearable conditions of life. Sophia, too, quickly got used to her new status, and against reasonable logic, she even managed to use this unfavorable circumstance to her advantage. After all, she had to survive not only on her own, but also to raise her son, and that required money. And she didn't have any. There was no one to consult with, and the woman was in total despair. One day, she went straight to the city administration. The officials were surprised by the visit of such an ambiguous person, but no one wanted to take responsibility. Sophia was now running around the offices until she realized that it would do nothing. She was ready to give up and go home with nothing, when an inner voice quietly whispered to her, "Sophia, go to the mayor himself, otherwise nothing will work." The woman timidly opened the reception door, but the receptionist looked at her menacingly. "You have to make an appointment to see the mayor." Sophia asked then to make an appointment for me. The receptionist pierced her again with an unfriendly look. "What's the job for?" "I can't find a job. And I have a young son. Everybody has kids, and William is very busy. He can't deal with every single mom separately. Go to the deputy. Or do you want to go to social services?" "Yeah, I've already been to all the offices." The secretary even got up from her spinning wheel in indignation. "Vasia is a chairwoman. Don't yell here. I told you to go to the deputy. It's just next door across from the reception area." But Sophia did not follow the secretary's advice. It was lunchtime, and the woman and her young son were sitting in a corner near the reception area. Greg was enthusiastically engaged in his car, whose wheels kept falling off, so it could not move. The boy rattled the wheels under his nose with the tenacity of a donkey and then tested the toy. Sophia watched her son, and her heart fluttered with pity for the child. "And what, son? There will be a holiday on our street. And then I'll buy you a bicycle and a bunch of different cars." The boy distracted from his occupation. "Mom, it will be soon." The woman did not have time to answer, because at that moment a whole group of people appeared in the corridor. Greg exhaled with admiration. "Wow. Mom, look what cool pictures they have." The son called the professional cameras that were in the hands of two men from this group. The woman did not have time to think about the purpose for which she had come to the administration of this delegation, as the door of the reception room opened sharply and the mayor, flashing a flawless smile, came out to the guests. "Come in. It is a pleasure to have our humble Castle Pines honored with media attention. A hunch flashed through Sophia's mind. It was the television crew. What happened next was spontaneous. The young mother had not expected herself to be so bold. She jumped out of her hiding place, interrupting the exchange of pleasantries between the mayor and the media. "William, you're the only one who can help me." The mayor's eyes went beyond orbits, and his two aides tried to push back the insolent. "Excuse me, hospital," but cameras were clicking on all sides. And a cheerful male voice pronounced, "Today, when democratic principles have become the norm of everyday life, representatives of local authorities try to be closer to the people." The mayor of small Castle Pines is no stranger to the aspirations of ordinary people who can ask for help at any time. Our film crew was lucky because we witnessed such an action. Good mercy. This is a young resident of the city, appealed to the mayor of William. After all, someone slipped the microphone. Sophia card, and then a cheerful voice asked, "Tell me, what brings you to the city administration today?" Sophia felt how bad. That pushes up to her throat. Dozens of eyes stared at her uninterruptedly, and the cameras made an unpleasant beeping sound. The mayor was expecting a response too, but his look didn't bode well. Behind him, someone whispered in a panic, "Woman, don't be silent. Say something." Unexpectedly, Greg answered for his mother. The boy stretched out his hand to the microphone and loudly announced that my mother and I had come from work. My grandmother died, and my dad went somewhere else. This answer of the child caused indescribable delight among those present. Even the head of the administration smiled, and the young reporter jumped up to Sophia and whispered to the cameraman, "Take a close-up of the boys." He then asked a few simple questions to the kid, and I didn't even stumble once while answering. Everyone looked at the boy with emotion. Then the microphone was passed to the mayor, and he confidently promised a solution to the citizens' issue. "I will take it under my personal control. The administration of Castle Pines will try to do everything possible to eliminate the existing problem. After all, the main task of the authorities is to improve the lives of ordinary people. And that's why we try to understand the problems of every citizen." The young reporter was happy to pick up on it, and we will follow the development of events. Sophia could not come to her senses for a long time, despite the fact that the cameras were already turned off. The aides escorted the woman and child to the mayor's office, and the head of the district smiled kindly at the woman. "Well, Sophia, you've caused quite a stir in our sleepy little town, but I have to say, your impromptu speech was a great success, although I haven't gotten to the bottom of it yet. But I can tell you were definitely in the right place at the right time tonight. To be honest, I was stunned by your sudden exit, and your little boy deserves a special commendation. Well done. He's a little boy, but he's already standing up for his mom. Give me your 5. Greg extended his hand to the mayor. At that moment, for the first time in his life, he felt important and proud of what he had done. The mayor once again promised the young mom to get her a job. On the same day in the evening, a report with their participation was shown on TV. Not even 10 minutes after the news, the home phone began to ring. The most surprising thing was that the first to remind of themselves were those who had not so long ago denied her friendship. But the main events awaited Sophia ahead. The next morning at exactly 9 o'clock, she received a call from the administration and was asked to come urgently to the office of the deputy mayor. The official met the woman with a smile on duty. "We discussed all the options with William yesterday. How do you feel about business?" This direct question should have caused the woman confusion, but she immediately answered positively. "I helped my landlady at one time, but she left Castle Pines for the regional center. She has a chain of stores there." The official happily interrupted the visitor. "You see, as they say, desire and labor will overcome everything. Moreover, you have experience, but I have no education. Education is something that comes with the job. Today, everyone studies by correspondence, and there is nothing to prevent you from following this example. The deputy mayor talked a lot about the prospects of life in his native Castle Pines, and at the very end of his speech offered the single mom to join the ranks of local entrepreneurs. The sewing shop where you used to work has been idle for several years. Soon there will be an auction, and the enterprise will go under the hammer. I admit that the administration has tried many times to find a good owner, but we have no luck with the buyer. No one can withstand even the insurance period. They think that investments in this enterprise will not justify themselves. Of course, there are difficulties, but you can't do without them in any business. A good owner or hostess will be able to find the key to the lock with a secret. Sophia realized that the deputy mayor was talking about her as a future business owner. She exclaimed in despair, "But I can't do it. And then I don't have any money." The official rubbed his hands together. "You can do it, and we'll help you. Especially since the case has gotten a lot of publicity. And now the TV crews won't be able to get away from us. I'm sure it won't be a week. How will you get voluntary sponsors? That's the kind of people we have in this country. They will give their last ruble for a good cause." The deputy mayor turned out to be right, and the young entrepreneur dared to start from scratch. They began to write articles about their business. Several times Sophia was invited to television. Patrons of the arts were also active, willing to help the enterprising woman. Max was among the voluntary helpers. Sophia always remembered her second husband with awe. But Greg, unlike his mother, even after many years thought of the workers with hatred. The morning talk had awakened these unpleasant feelings in his soul, and he showed up at the office already on edge. Wanting to put his thoughts in order a little, he headed for his office. But no sooner had Greg opened the door than he heard the cheerful voice of Kevin. "Greg, are you late today? I've been waiting for you." The last thing he wanted to do now was to listen to the head of the supply department. So Greg made a short arrangement. "My wife got sick last night and was taken to the hospital by ambulance." Kevin's face changed. "And what happened to your wife? If it's a secret, you don't have to tell me." "I realize you can't tell me everything about family matters. There's nothing secret. Molly never complained of appendicitis, and then suddenly it kicked in. Sophia must have gone to visit her sister-in-law this morning. That's why I see she's late. Greg, you have an extraordinary mom. Are you lucky to have her?" Greg wrinkled his nose. "Kevin, I know all about my mother. If it's a matter of business, why did you just let your thorns out? Did I step on your tail? Kevin, let's not turn my office into a place for unnecessary discussion." Kevin took offense, as evidenced by his flaring ears and unkind eyes. He said emphatically formally, "All right, Greg, let's switch to the business language of communication. If you are not already aware of it, I have to inform you that Sophia has instructed our department to buy materials and fittings." Greg impatiently interrupted. "I am aware of that. If that's all you wanted to tell me, I dare not detain you any longer." Kevin minted separately, every syllable. "You're wasting your breath, Greg. To me it's a very narrow neck, and not everyone can get out." "Greg Boyle, are you threatening me?" "God forbid. Absolutely not. As a delicate man, I just want to draw your attention to one very important point. You don't shit where you feed." The last words Kevin said, clearly alluding to his failed deal. "I warned you it was dangerous to mess with Cleopatra. And you didn't believe Uncle Kevin. Be thankful your mother doesn't know you're being arbitrary. I am a deeply decent man and do not engage in whistleblowing." Greg felt cold sweat rolling down his back in large data. Barely audible, he whispered, "Thank you, Konstantinovich." Kevin headed for the exit, but the very doors turned around Greg. "Do you want some ethical advice? Keep it simple, and people will be attracted to you." Kevin closed the door behind him, and Greg sat down in the chair, leaving his head back. "What day is it? Molly gave out a number tonight. Then my mom surprised me. And now Kevin's trying to teach me about life. How much does he look like my dead stepfather?" The wheel of memory has turned again this morning and taken a turn back in time. And, as the song goes, Greg took a trip down the waves of his memory. In his 80s, Greg perceived everything that happened in the most vivid colors. It's adults who can color life in halftones. But children are clear, day and night. Friend or foe, Max bursts into their lives, suddenly disrupting the order of the house. Yes, his appearance only entitled him to his mother's attention and love. So the boy's first reaction was indignation. Then he did not realize that his mother had decided on this important step not immediately. Most likely, she had been seeing Max for some time, but she did not dare to invite him home. It was late fall when Sophia told her son, "We'll have a guest today. What do you think about it?" Greg looked at his mother with a sidelong glance and muttered, "I don't think so. Why do we need a guest?" The mother was confused and began to explain that people should socialize because it's boring to be alone. The son looked at her and kept wrinkling his nose. "Mom, I know all about friendship and good relationships, but I think that we are very good together. But if you want more friends, you can invite them over. Just don't make me smile and say anything stupid." "Sophia," laughed Greg. "What do you think?" My boy didn't understand the meaning of the word and remained silent. Only at dinner he asked who your guest was. The woman had been waiting for this question and answered readily. "Have you seen him before?" "Once. Remember, when we bought the factory, different people came and offered to help us. I remember that day very well, because one of the sponsors gave him a game console. True, it quickly broke down. Recalls that moment. It was nice. This is the man who gave me the toy." "No, son. That man gave us some cars. They were used, but they were in good working order. His name is Max." The boy asked with feigned bewilderment. "What?" "A sewing machine." Greg came in, and with laughter, and the mother waited for the fit of hilarity to pass. "Son, I'm talking to you seriously, and you're a fool, studying." "Okay, Mom, I won't laugh anymore. Just promise me that you won't marry this Max." Sophia obviously didn't expect such an ultimatum from her son. "Greg, are you too young to give me conditions?" The boy parried, "But I have rights too. I don't want some uncle living in our house and you making me call him father." Guys in our class told me that about their stepfather's V. The boy went into a hysterical screaming fit and hid in his room. Sophia, for fear of hurting the child's wounded psyche, changed her plans. She knocked on her son's room when he opened the door and said, "Calm down. We won't have guests today. Where will you go on a date?" "I'll come with that Max." You guessed it. The woman hugged her son and kissed him on the top of his head. "Zhika, don't be so mean. You choose your own friends at school. Notice that I do not interfere in this process at all. Let me make my own choices." When his mother went to live, he felt so sad that he almost declared. He barely waited for his mother to return and right in the hallway expressed his final decision. "Mom, let this your Max comes to us. Then I am very bad alone without you." Max won the heart of the boy that from the first meeting, he did not start to pussyfoot with him, and spoke like an adult, although his mother also always took into account his opinion. But Mom is a woman, and Max is a grown man, and he is, as the boys at school used to say. Very quickly, Greg became friends with his stepfather. Max drove him in his car to the zoo where the animals lived. He even let the boy sit behind the wheel of his car a few times. There were many more things that his classmates went in with envy of the farmer. Sophia was glad that her men had found common ground. One day she told her son, "Now, we have a real family." "You like that, Greg," Uncle Max admitted to the ladies. "He's really nice. He's fun to be with. He told me so many things. He also promised to take me night fishing." "Mom, I'll catch a bream like that, or even by myself." The boy showed with his hands the size of the fish he promised to catch. One day, he himself asked his stepfather, "Can I call you father?" Max had been waiting for this question for a long time and could not hide his excitement. "Of course, son, call me father or father. What do you prefer?" But the period of family idyll didn't last long. Greg began to notice that his mother was very fulfilled. With childlike candor, he said, "You need to work out. You'll soon become quite fat. like our Wendy, a math teacher who really had very lush forms. And this comparison made Sophia smile. No, I won't be like that, because it's a temporary fullness. The boy stared at his mother in bewilderment. Is there such a thing? It does. I was so fat once before. And then you were born, and I lost weight immediately. Greg was at an age when he knew how babies came to be. So his mother's confession came as a shock to him. He looked at her smiling face, and indignation rose in his heart, which burst out with a scream. You're going to have a baby, but I don't want one. The boy was beating hysterically. Sophia could not calm him. The unhappy woman could not have imagined that her son would take the news so violently. She tried to convince him that he would have a brother or sister and that he would have more fun. The mother did not realize at that time that her son did not want to share her with anyone. He hardly accepted Max only because this person fulfilled his desires, that is, brought a certain benefit. And what benefit could there be in having another child? Greg refused to understand. Sophia hoped that everything would settle down when the baby came into the world, but she was wrong when the tiny lump in a pink envelope was brought home. Her newfound brother wrinkled his nose squeamishly. She stinks. I don't even want to go near her. Time passed, but the boy never gave up his position. Kelly was growing up, and her happy parents rejoiced at her successes, but in Greg's heart, hatred blossomed. He hated his mother for betraying him, hated his stepfather for not being a real father to him, but he hated his little sister the most. Max was the first to notice that there was something wrong in their family. Greg always kept his ear to the ground and often eavesdropped on adult conversations to make sure he didn't miss anything important. He heard his stepfather reprimanding his mother in the kitchen. Sophia, something has to be done about this. It's not normal. The guy's really burning with hate. The mother tried to stand up for her son. Max, I think you're losing it. He's going through puberty, so he's showing his temper. Sophia, but I've seen with my own eyes how much hatred he looks at Kelly. I've been alarmed before by some things that I didn't pay much attention to. Frankly, I fear for our daughter. Please talk to your son. Maybe he'll listen to you. We had a serious conversation that same evening, but Greg descended into rudeness from the first second. Yeah, screw Kelly. Do you even like her? Don't touch me. Not until you graduate, and you won't see me at all. That was the cry of a spoiled egomaniac soul. It was only at that moment that Sophia realized that in 16 years she had never gotten to know her son. As promised, Greg disappeared from home after receiving his diploma. He didn't even come on vacation because he didn't want to meet his sister. And then the woman accidentally learned that her son had somehow miraculously found Leo. This news stunned her, and she herself went to the city where her son studied. But Greg wouldn't even listen to his mother. Mom, you're too late with your instructions. I'm all grown up now, and I'll decide for myself what to do and who to talk to. But I promise I won't bother you, and I'm not going to give up my own father just because something bad happened between you two a long time ago. For a few years, the guy really didn't show up, only called his mother occasionally. But communication with his own father changed his outlook on life. Now Greg recalled with horror how he decided to take revenge. And this action he had decided to coincide with his half-sister's coming of age. The unhappy memories, even more than the conversations with Kevin, spoiled Greg's mood to find some equilibrium. He ventured to deal with his wife's medical condition. Sophia disliked hospitals because medical facilities conjured up unpleasant associations for her. After all, she had spent many days and nights with her mother at the bedside of her paralyzed father. For 24 hours a day, she did not leave her dying mother's side. Therefore, the mere thought that she would have to cross the threshold of the hospital caused panic terror in the woman's soul. Probably, this fear was reflected on her face when she asked the post nurse, "I'm here to see Molly." She's a post-op girl who looked anxiously at the visitor. "Don't worry, your Molly is fine. She's in Ward 6, probably already awake from the anesthesia." Sophia threw a white robe on her shoulders and, trying not to make noise, walked down the corridor near the ward where her sister-in-law was lying. She stopped and knocked for some reason. Someone shouted loudly, "Come in. I'm sorry we can't meet." The cheerful voice belonged to a girl who was lying by the window with an open book. In total, there were 4 people in the ward, and Sophia did not immediately find Molly. She turned to the very girl who had invited her. "Where is she till now?" "At the very door. There are no others yet." Molly spoke up. "You can't argue with that. Maria, you're screaming for all the right times to be awake, and at least be sick. It's not like I've never been in a hospital. Only when I was a kid, I had a bug in my ear. The doctors could barely get it out." Molly turned her gaze to Sophia. "I knew you'd be the first to visit me. Zurich must have scared you." On the contrary, he was very tactful about everything. Sophia took her sister-in-law's hand. "Tell me, how do you feel?" Reluctant Maria raised her voice. "I'm fine. Everything will be running by evening." Molly looked toward her companion. "Maria, could you be quiet for a minute? I'm less than 24 hours in this ward, and I'm already tired of you. Let's be sad. Girlfriend, I'm supposed to be discharged today, so you're going to miss me." Molly waved her hands helplessly. "I'm sorry, Sophia, but I guess we won't be able to have a normal conversation." "All right, I'll drop by tomorrow. You don't have to bother. I'm not sick enough to visit every day." "Dad's worried too. He should be here soon," Greg told him. "I told you not to panic." Molly tried to sit up, but immediately wrinkled in pain. Her mother-in-law immediately jumped up to her. "Let me help you." Maria's daughter raised her voice again. "I dream of such a mother-in-law, although I do not want to get married, but still dreaming is not harmful." "Well, I won't bother you. I'll pack my clothes." The girl began to put things in a plastic bag and accompanied this process with clear statements. Sophia began to say goodbye to her sister-in-law, and at that moment a nurse came into the room. "Queen, you're ready." The mouse stretched out, sitting down, threw off her hand to the invisible ones at the visor. "Always ready." Sophia stared at the girl's hand, not immediately realizing what had caught her attention. Molly noticed that there was something wrong with her mother-in-law. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, I'm fine." But the woman's eyes were fixed on her sister-in-law's neighbor. Meanwhile, Maria grabbed her bag and slipped past, and only then Sophia realized that the object of her concern was the silver bracelet adorning the girl's wrist. She hastily said goodbye to her sister-in-law. "Molly, I have to go. I'll call you tonight." The woman hoped to catch up with Masha in the hallway and ask the girl about how she got this bracelet. But right in the doorway, she ran into Molly's father. "Peter, did you scare me?" The man didn't expect to meet under such unusual circumstances either. "You almost knocked me over." "Sophia, is there a fire somewhere?" "No, I'm just afraid I'm going to miss a little man." "Well, I won't keep you." She ran down the corridor, but Maria was nowhere to be seen. Sophia couldn't find her in the check room or the waiting room. She jumped outside, but there were only a few men in hospital uniforms walking around. There were no women around at all. Sophia sat down on a bench. She tried to calm herself. Did you just think it was the same bracelet Kelly had gotten for her birthday? There aren't many trinkets like that on the market. Go to any jewelry store and you're bound to find a similar piece. Suddenly, Sophia's familiar voice sounded nearby. "What's wrong with you?" "I must admit that I am concerned about your condition, so I said goodbye." "You shouldn't be, Peter. I'm fine. Don't be fooled by an experienced detective. I have a keen eye, and I knew immediately that something had come up that caused you instant stress. Tell me, I may be able to help you." Although Molly and Greg had been married for over 3 years, their parents met very rarely and mostly on major holidays. So their acquaintance was casual, and they had never had a frank conversation. The woman was silent for a moment, and then looked hopefully at the matchmaker. "You know, Peter, can you really help me?" The man sat down next to her, and by his expression, it was easy to guess that he had awakened a professional instinct. "I think I know what prompted you to chase after that girl who ran out of the room a second before I arrived. Probably tennis past or something else. It was more like a sign from above. Aha. I didn't realize you were superstitious. Sometimes there are moments in life when you start to believe in a higher power. It rarely happens to me, but this morning my grandmother came to mind. And then that girl with the bracelet. You intrigue me. If you could tell me more about it. And Sophia told her daughter-in-law's father how many years ago she and her husband gave their daughter a bracelet for her coming of age, which was made to order by a jeweler she knew. It was a personalized piece. There's an engraving on the inside. Kelly had long dreamed of such a thing and was very happy with the gift. A few days later, it disappeared. Tell me, under what circumstances did your daughter disappear? Tears appeared in the woman's eyes. She took a handkerchief out of her purse. I'm sorry, Peter. I'm sorry, Peter. Don't I know what it's like to lose a child? I've had many such cases in my practice, and unfortunately, they don't always end well. I'm still hopeful. I feel in my heart that my Kelly is alive. I was so reluctant to let her go on that unfortunate camping trip, and my husband said you can't stop a girl from doing what she likes. Kelly was very fond of traveling, and that day they went to the lakes in groups. Old people claimed that there were places of power there and told all sorts of legends. Greg went too, because he was worried about the young people. He is almost 10 years older than Kelly. Peter waited for the story to continue, but Sophia was silent. Only after about 5 minutes she said with a kind of frightening doom, Kelly's disappearance was only discovered in the morning. The boys searched for her. They went to all the neighboring villages, but no one had seen the girl. It was as if she'd vanished into thin air. Her husband couldn't bear the loss. For more than a week, the search was conducted, but it did not yield results, and Max had a heart attack. He loved his daughter very much. Sophia burst into tears. The matchmaker gave her a chance to cry. You cry, to ease your soul. I promise I'll try to find out what happened on that camping trip. Did your son tell you anything about what happened? He's the key witness. The woman waved her hand. Greg was asleep and didn't see or hear anything. He was with the rest of the campers looking for his sister. So many years had passed, and it was unlikely that he would remember any details now. Sophia was silent, as if remembering something important. Peter, maybe the fact that we haven't found Kelly's papers is relevant. Her passport and driver's license disappeared with her. Your daughter was driving the car on her own. She hasn't gotten behind the wheel yet, but her father promised to buy her a small car. These are important details. As soon as I know anything definite, I'll let you know. But the first thing I'll do is try to find this girl who's the mystery bracelet. Sophia took a long look. Jenna saw her off. She was suddenly at peace, like that time. After praying in church, Kelly. Jenna was the name she was using now. She felt out of sorts. She'd been a mess since this morning. She'd even managed to forget her apartment keys on the nightstand. Her mind was racing with unhappy thoughts. What am I supposed to do now? It is known that I will have to open the door and then repair the lock or buy a new one. The landlady will find out exactly, nail me or give me a day to evict. That's worse than the first option. With such not cheerful thoughts, Kelly appeared in the office of the company, where she worked as a courier for a little over a year. The head of the department immediately jumped on her. Jenna, where do you go? Like where? Running your errands? Delivering mail to the addresses you gave me. You need to move fast. You're young. It always pissed Jenna off when underachievers came out and pretended to be important. So what, Miranda? If I'm young, I should be running around like a horse. By the way, you're not much older than me. Don't compare. You're a long way from me. The girl snapped. To your place. Don't worry. I don't claim it. The superintendent smirked. What do you care? Go to work. I still have to distribute advertising brochures for today, and then to prepare for tomorrow's report for the month. Isn't that a lot for one person? That's your direct responsibility. That's right, Miranda. You've got half the department working their asses off, and I have to run around for everyone. Jenna voiced her displeasure with a deep sense of contempt for the slackers who made up the bulk of the company's staff for the umpteenth time this year. She thought wistfully that she had been wasting her time in this office, wishing she could make herself feel better. She muttered, "Did I have a choice? My whole life has become one endless quest, and I don't know when I'll reach the finish line." From the height of her years, the girl scolded herself for that childish act, but she couldn't afford to go back in time, because she knew what her disappearance from home had led to. Many times she turned back in her mind the events of 10 years ago and came to the conclusion that she would have done exactly the same thing today. Kelly learned to feel first and then speak. One of her first childhood memories was of her older brother's face contorted with anger. When her parents weren't around, he would scare her. Later, Greg began to apply to her younger sister more harsh measures of influence, pouring ice water and saying at the same time, "Die damn doll." Often, a loving sibling specially fed her sweets to make her grandfather appear. He would sneak her cat food and laugh at her when she drank the stuff. Of course, when Kelly was very young, she thought her brother was playing with her, but as time went on, it came to her that it wasn't play, but a sophisticated kind of bullying. It was useless to complain to her mother about her brother's behavior because she thought her daughter was making it up. "Kelly, this is all your fantasy. You want me to believe them." Only her father tried to protect her from Greg's bullying. Life became a little easier when Greg went to college. There was peace and quiet in the house at once. All the parental love went to her alone. But one day her brother came back, and Kelly realized that he was up to something, and her premonitions were right. One day she saw Greg talking to a man she didn't know at all by accident. This was a man she had never met before at Castle Pines and decided to follow her brother around a bit. The man didn't evoke any positive emotions. He was, what would be the right way to put it, a very unpleasant type. Decently dressed, quite handsome, but he was repulsive at once. Kelly didn't speak to him, of course, but it was enough for her to get a good look at him. He reminded her of someone, but who was it she hadn't realized right away? It wasn't until the 4th or 5th day of following her brother that she got close enough to hear what they were talking about. Greg and the man had entered the cafe, and Kelly immediately followed them. She sat down at a table that was behind an archway. The men couldn't see her, but she could hear them. They were talking about her, not just about her, but about their family in general. The more Kelly listened, the more the hairs on her head moved. The brother couldn't think of anything more original than simply getting rid of his hated sister. It was as if the man had even tried to talk him out of it. "Look, Greg, it's not really her fault. It's all her mother's fault. I mean, it's your mother's fault, too. If she'd waited for me to get out of jail, the three of us would still be living together. Dad, don't you ever say anything like that again. She's my mother, and she has a right to live. And the rest of you and your mother, I can work it out somehow. But these, and I want to start with my sister. She's ruined my whole life." The man immediately replied, "Okay, don't boil. If you want to decide, you have to do it. I didn't realize you had such hatred for her. Do you have any idea how we can pull this off? No, you have some experience with this stuff. That's why I came to you for help. So tell me where she goes, where she likes to go. We need to make sure we're on the up and up." Greg started to tell Kelly was afraid to breathe. She was scared because her brother in a mundane voice listed all the things she likes, where she goes, and at the same time discussed with her father where it is more convenient and not possible to take her out, and to do it so cunningly, so that no one would guess anything. Kelly also realized one simple thing. After Greg gets rid of her, he's going after her father. She's going camping with her friends. They love the outdoors. Now, this is where we're gonna get into it. This could be very interesting for us. After listening to everything Greg knew, the man exclaimed, "That's what's needed." The girl could get lost in the woods, drown, fall from somewhere. The options are endless. Greg said, confused, "I don't get it. I'm the one who's supposed to be hating her. Who do you hate so much? Or are you going to send someone else on the trip? Don't worry. You're a big man, And she's just a young girl. You'll be fine. We'll figure it out. Yeah, but how am I gonna get in with them? They're not my friends. I mean, I know some of them, but we're not friends enough for me to go with them. It's pretty simple. You just tell your mom that it's not safe to go camping like this, that you're worried about your sister. She's a young girl, and you're only going so you can keep an eye on her. The men were long gone. Kelly was still sitting squeezed into the chair. Something had to be done. She knew Greg would convince her mother. Kelly would not be able to change her mind. Rather, the mother would only be strengthened in her decision because her daughter did not want to be in foster care. And the mother will also be very happy that they finally have a good relationship. Everything happened exactly as Kelly expected. Mom was very happy that Greg wanted to accompany Kelly on the camping trip. She kept saying, "Well, that's good. Your brother and sister, you should have a close, trusting relationship." Greg smiled at her sister, and Kelly smiled back. She couldn't show him that she knew or guessed everything. Then the girl might just not make it to the camping trip. She had planned everything diligently. Kelly had always been noted for her ability to think straight, so she double-checked everything several times to make sure there were no overlaps. Greg had to do something with her at night, and on the first night, she knew for sure that he would not give up on anything. That's why she prepared in earnest. Kelly had money, and not the money that her father and mother constantly transferred to her card, but cash, which the girl had been saving for years. For nothing in particular, she just put aside what was left of her pocket money. She was always serious and frugal. Besides, there was nothing to buy, because Kelly had everything. She took all the essentials with her, took all the money, especially since no one in the house knew about her savings. And most importantly, the girl-toothed invented one address, which she wrote in her father's notebook. It was Helen's address, the woman her father had dated before he met her mother. Kelly's choice was no accident. One day, when Kelly thought she was in love and was having a disagreement with her father, Kelly shouted at him, "Dad, what do you know about love?" "You met Mom. That's all love is." Max smiled then. "Well, that's just your opinion. Do you want me to tell you about a very wonderful woman that I can't forget to this day? I love your mom very much, but Helen, she was probably not only a woman, but the best all-understanding friend." Kelly stared at him, eyes wide open. She had never imagined that her parents could have had anyone in their lives other than each other. "Helen and I met by chance. She was scolding me for almost running over a kitten. Of course, I just saw it late and stopped right away. But I got the best of her. You know, she was so beautiful in her anger, and then she just kind of spun around." Helen fought back to the last. She was married, and she had an invalid husband who didn't do a damn thing but grind her nerves. I'd ask her many times to leave. And then she just kicked me out. Said she was happy with me, that I showed her a different life. But she couldn't leave her husband, and she didn't want to cheat anymore. I understood her. Cheating is too hard for her. Is she so pure, or what? Helen took an oath from me that I would never try to contact her again and try to arrange my personal life. I tried to help her financially at least, but she wouldn't take it. And that was that. Kelly remembered that after her father's story she had stayed up all night. And when she thought about whether the young man she had fallen in love with was capable of such actions, she realized that it was not love after all. Kelly was going to turn to her for help. Greg looked at her the whole time they were getting there. Kelly was getting sick to her stomach. It was his looks. She felt like a hunted victim. Everything went well once everyone settled down. And the girl Kelly was in the tent with fell asleep. She quietly grabbed her backpack and looked outside. Conversation could still be heard in the tents. This meant that Greg would not be doing anything right now. He wouldn't do anything during the night because it would be clear that the culprit for her death was someone who was here. Kelly wasn't going to hide for long. She needed some time to pass. Maybe something would change, or she would figure out how to get out of this whole situation. For now, there were no thoughts in her head. The door was opened by a pretty woman. "Hello, you're here to see me." "Yes, Helen. The woman looked at her with interest. Yes, I'm Helen. Have we met? Kelly smiled sadly. Not really. I'm Max's daughter. Helen stepped back, clasped her hands to her chest. What's wrong with Max? Kelly rushed to reassure her. No, Dad's fine. He told me about you. That's why I came to see you. I need help, but only from someone who won't be thought of. Helen looked at her carefully. Come in. I'm alone now. My daughter has gone to her grandmother's. Strange, but Dad didn't say anything about a daughter. She must have been born later. They talked all night. Helen agreed that it would be better for her to spend some time here. At her place. Don't worry, you're not embarrassing us at all. I've got the world. You two are bound to become friends. How old is she? She's 2 years older than you. You know, after your father and I split up, my husband died a couple years later. He'd been drinking too much, so I decided to find my dad. I even came to your town. But then I found out he got married and his wife was expecting a baby and left right away. Kelly smiled sadly. I guess I should be jealous of your father, resentful of your mom. But it turns out that Mom took your place. No, don't ever think that. Mom met me when I wasn't around. She didn't take my place. Everything happened the way it was supposed to happen. And anyway, it's been years, so it's all in the past. Maria turned out to be a real-world girl. And Kelly also thought they looked a lot alike. Kelly even gave her her bracelet, which was very dear to her. And then Maria came into the room and said, Kelly, your dad's dead. It's all over the internet. That's it. From that moment on, Kelly's life was divided into before and after. Kelly, maybe you should stay. Where are you going? How are you going to live? Like everyone else. Get an apartment, get a job. But we're not kicking you out. Helen wiped away her tears, and Kelly spoke quickly. You understand me. Please, I can't. I can't live peacefully as if nothing had happened. Daddy, it's out of me. I should have realized this would happen. Daddy loved me very much, and Mommy will never forgive me. Let it be so. Mommy was already crying for me and Daddy. And me. I'll start all over again. It's just the way it is. At least give me your new address. No. Helen, please forgive me. I don't deserve to talk to you. Kelly, but you can't hide forever. They're gonna find you. You'll be working. You'll be on the payroll. They'll find you, right? No one's gonna find me. Kelly stepped into the night. In the pocket of her jacket was a brand new crystal and a passport, which she had gotten not so long ago for very good money. Almost everything she had. Molly was being discharged in a week. In all that time, Sophia hadn't seen Peter. And then they met nose to nose. Sophia, hello. You are also for Molly. But my daughter has long been more of a part of you than me. So I'll just meet her and walk her home. Well, I won't just let you go. At least we'll have tea together. Peter smiled, clarifying, I won't refuse, especially since I managed to find out something. Sophia raised her eyebrows upward. So fast. Did you really find out something about that girl? Yes, I did. I didn't know it was possible. I've been looking for my daughter for years, and still no sign of her. Well, Sophia, that's if you're working for a paycheck. But if you work as a friend, it's a different matter. I don't justify my colleagues at all, but that's life. The woman nodded sadly. Yes, unfortunately, you're right. Molly sadly asked her mother-in-law, didn't Greg come? No, Molly, he couldn't. The thing is that we have some changes in the firm, and now he has to work hard. Under Kevin's guidance, he'll try to come early today, he promised, and he said hello. Molly smiled. I can imagine what kind of mood he'll be in. I've heard enough about Kevin. Sophia laughed. He's complaining. It's okay. Let him study. It's for his own good. Molly only sat with them for 10 minutes. I'll go and lie down. I'm still a little weak. I have ideas, of course. My daughter. Peter smiled. It's so unusual, even unusual, to hear my daughter called daughter. Sophia smiled, but she's really like a daughter to me. You know, sometimes I think she's a lot like Kelly, just as gentle, kind. Peter frowned. Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about. Sophia looked up. Yes, I'm listening very carefully. Peter took out a small notebook. So here's what I found out. Maria Queen lives in a small town. By the way, your late husband used to live there. I don't get it. What does that have to do with Max? Take your time, Sophia. So this girl lives with her mom. The mom's a couple years younger than you. But that's not what's important. I went to that town, walked around, saw the people, talked to them, and I found out one very interesting detail. This woman gave birth to her daughter while she was married. Everything seemed to be right, but her husband could not have children because he was, excuse me, crippled after some accident. Everyone told me that the woman was dating someone rich and handsome. He invited her to come with him, but she refused and stayed with her husband. As you can imagine, in such small towns, everyone knows everything about everyone, and even more like to discuss, especially if you are properly interested in it. Of course, I managed to get interested, and it turns out by all accounts that I dated Maria's mother. It was your husband in those days. He was not yet your husband. He probably didn't even know you because it was only after he broke up with that woman that he moved here. I'm not really sure what the bracelet and everything else has to do with it. I haven't had a lot of time. But I promise you, I will definitely find out. Sophia silently stood up and left the room. She came back and put a few bundles of money in front of her. This is for your expenses. Something tells me you're on the right track. As soon as we find out about Dawn, that is, how he got to that girl, that's how we'll find out. Peter, please don't tell my son anything. I don't know why, but I don't think he'd be happy if Kelly was found. And he'll say I'm crazy because Kelly is presumed dead. And I'm the only one who can't believe it. Peter nodded and worried. As long as the investigation lasts you, and I will never know anything. I understand that. I'll take money, but not much, just enough for a return ticket. Sophia shook her head negatively. No, take the money for all expenses. She also went upstairs, brought the keys. These are the keys to her husband's car. It's sitting in the garage doing nothing. They take it in for a checkup every 6 months, and that's it. I'll call the garage and have them give it to you. Peter got behind the wheels. Thank you very much. It's a very long commute on buses and trains. You know, you don't assure yourself very much that Kelly will be found. You realize you could be disappointed. Sophia looked at him quickly. I'm sure she's alive. Do whatever you want with me. Greg arrived a little early, as promised, and hugged his wife. Why did the appendicitis happen to you? Well, I really missed you. She even laughed. You say that like there's only one appendicitis in our town in 3 years. And I have it. No, of course not. Somebody's gonna feed me. I even put my finger to my lips. Don't yell. So Mom must be feeling sick. She's locked herself in her room for hours without coming out. Greg raised his eyebrows at his mother. It wasn't like that. Her beloved Molly was out of the hospital, and her mother wasn't flocking around her like a hen. Greg knocked softly on the door. Mom, can I come in? Yes, son, come in. He entered the room and frowned. Mom, you again. Around Sophia were spread pictures of Kelly. She looked at her son with tearful eyes. I don't understand why you are so uncomfortable with the memory of Kelly. She's your sister. Greg tried to soften his expression. Mom, you misunderstand me. I don't want you to be so upset. Why? Kelly, no, and nothing can bring her back. After all these years, you have to get over it. No, I'm never gonna get over it, and you know it. And lately I've been getting this feeling like we're gonna find her soon. Greg almost cried, God forbid, but he held back. He'd been getting too many bad vibes lately too. And one of them is that if someone brings up Cleopatra's firm again, they're bound to find out that the firm was created by him. And it was run by Leo, his father, and the same man who had once been his mother's husband. Greg didn't want to hurt his mother, but she was too much of a nuisance. There was no way to go into the open. And waiting until the firm was legally in his possession wasn't something he wanted to do either. He wanted to become its sole owner as soon as possible and make decisions on his own and finally fire that nasty Kevin. "Mom, let's go to dinner." Molly's setting the table. How is Molly supposed to rest? Oh, that dissipated. Mother took a quick step towards the kitchen. Greg grabbed one picture of his sister and hissed, "What is it that you still give me peace of mind? I hope you died a long time ago." He threw the photo back and followed Sophia. Peter showed up a week later. He was just jammed with news. Really, he didn't know how he should handle the situation now. What he had learned could not leave life the same. No one's life. Not Sophia's, not Greg's, and certainly not his daughter's. Peter called Sophia. "We need to meet. I have a lot of news." The woman was just at work, picked up the phone to warn her son that she was going to be away. But then she changed her mind and dialed Kevin's number. "Kevin, I need to leave, but I want no one to know that I am not at the firm." Kevin always understood her from the first word, especially Greg. "Okay, I hear you. Sophia, I need help. And to be honest, I don't know yet. I'll call you. One more thing. I keep wondering about that Cleopatra firm. Can't you find out more about it?" "And I will. Especially since it's been bugging me too." Sophia sank into a chair in front of Peter. "I ordered you some tea." "Yes, thank you for recognizing me." "Well, I guess I'll start with the main thing. Is your daughter alive?" "Well, at least she was alive when everyone thought she was dead." Sophia went pale, clutched her chest. "Please calm down. It's not that simple. We're going to have a hard and long conversation." The woman listened attentively to everything Peter was telling her, every now and then she shook her head. "No, it just can't be." Maybe Sophia, the girl, was so scared that she didn't dare to ask for help from anyone she knew. "Do you understand?" Did she nod? "Yes. You know, Kelly told me a few times about Greg, but I always thought it was just a figment of her imagination. Because everything seems so meaningful when you're a teenager. But why did she go there in the first place?" That's another news flash for you. The fact is that Helen was actually dating and Max, after they broke up, had a daughter, Maria, whom you saw in the hospital. It's not hard to guess if her husband was up to no good. And Max? Well, by all accounts, it's Max's daughter that he never found out about. Maybe that was the reason the girls had become such good friends that Kelly had given her her bracelet. Sophia looked up at Peter. "I don't understand. It's been so many years. Why hasn't Kelly come back?" "There are several reasons. The most important one, which she told Helen, is that she blames herself for her father's death, feels guilty in front of you, in front of the whole world. Either she's punishing herself, or she really feels that guilty in front of you. Second, are you sure that if Kelly comes back, she'll be safe? I mean, just hearing that conversation saved her life. No, that's just not possible. Greg, he couldn't. Sophia, I hate to say this, but I'm going to have to tell my daughter. She needs to know who's around her. After all, it's dangerous. No, he can't be a monster. He's my son." At that moment, the phone rang in Sophia's pocket. She picked it up. "Kevin, it's urgent. I'm a little busy. I won't take up much of your time. I want to tell you that Cleopatra's manager is very familiar to you. That's Greg Leo's father. Yes, in fact, Greg gave him the firm. But why? If you stop thinking of Greg only as a son, you'll understand." Kevin passed out, and Sophia looked up at Peter. The man shivered involuntarily. How much had the woman's look changed? Now before him sat a lady with a steely gaze and a very heavy expression. "Peter, I'm going to need some more of your help so you don't have to worry. I'm sending Molly to the sea tonight. I'll tell her she needs to recuperate. She'll listen to me." "Yes, thank you. I'll do what I can." She leaned toward him and began to speak. "Sophia, but I don't want to go anywhere without Greg. You don't even understand. Greg needs a healthy wife. Your hemoglobin is low. You need to get some rest. He's so busy now anyway, you won't even see him. Greg, who at first grudgingly accepted his mother's words, sighed, "Yes, Mom is right. Lately, she's just been swamping me with work. Nothing will happen to us in a week. Go get some rest and come back soon." Of course, he didn't like that his mother didn't offer him a vacation, but she's been in a mood lately. So it's best to keep quiet and keep working to make sure everyone finally forgets this Cleopatra thing. Father is also good. As soon as he realized that the smell of fried, just withdrew money from where he could and got away. And now he's got to deal with it. Mother nodded her head and went to her room. Didn't even kiss him. The next day, after Molly left and he went back to work, he got a call from Sophia. "Gotcha. I have to go away for a few days. I'll call you." "Mom," but there's a short ringtone. Then a text for Kevin in charge. Oh, how much he wanted to tell her now. But Mom didn't pick up the phone again. She was on her way with Peter to where her daughter was supposedly. "Jenna, are you late again?" Kelly inwardly howled. What the hell was wrong with this? Everything's been a mess since this morning. The faucet leaked this morning. Obviously, you can't buy a new one at 7 o'clock hours. But to leave it like that means putting the neighbors at risk. We had to wait for the plumber, who is never in a hurry. "Miranda, honestly, it's not my fault." The woman folded her arms across her chest and looked at her. "Well, I'm listening to you. Tell us another incident that somehow only happens to you." It wasn't true. Everyone in the office was always late, but it was only Kelly who was getting smacked around. Now the girl realized that she couldn't work in such conditions anyway. "And you know what, Miranda, I'm not going to tell you anything and prove it, because it's all useless." The boss's eyebrows went up. "How do you talk? What do you think you're doing? What are you? An errand boy, or rather an errand girl? You keep your mouth shut, or you'll be out of here in no time. And I'd be happy to fly you out. I'm just wondering what the wording will be. You understand that I have nothing to lose now, and I will go to our chief to tell him how the department works, which spoils the firm all the indicators. And I'll even explain why it's happening." Miranda gasped with indignation, not for the first time. This girl is insinuating to her that she is failing in her duties. "You're at the UN, and you won't get anything from me without a paycheck." Kelly thought wistfully that there was no way to pay the rent. On what grounds do you not give an employee the money he has earned? You have to pay him back within 24 hours. Miranda stared in amazement at the woman who approached them, frozen, afraid to turn around. Tears streamed from her eyes. She wanted to run away, but realized that such coincidences do not happen. Her mother had found her. Everything else seemed to fade into a fog. She didn't hear Miranda answering. She slowly turned to where her mom was standing. "Mommy." Kelly literally fell into Sophia's arms. She was holding on with all her might. "My silly girl, why didn't you tell me everything? Why didn't you tell me? If I hadn't found you." Greg had to leave after talking to his mother. He listened in silence with his head bowed. Only once he said, "You're ready to put me in jail for her, just like you always do." "You are wrong. I will not put you in jail, but only because you are my son. And I give you the opportunity to start a new life. And I'm even gonna help you do it. But you don't get to decide how or who should live. You're not God." Molly said she's going with her husband. He needed someone close, and she was the closest thing he had. Peter was not very happy with this decision, but accepted his daughter's choice. Sophia met Helen, and after a short time they became real friends, and Kelly and Maria studied hard to run the company. A year after all the events, Kelly and Maria came home smiling mysteriously. "Moms, we have news for you." The women who were drinking tea looked at each other. Sounds terrifying. Helen had moved closer to them at Sophia's insistence. Kelly laughed and nudged Masha in the side. "Come on, you're better at this." Maria drew in a breath and said, "Today we have guests. We decided to introduce you to our guys to get their approval, so to speak. Anyway, Kelly and I are getting married." The girls expected any kind of reaction, but not this. First air was thrown by Maria's mother, followed by Kelly's mother. A second later, the women were laughing. Maria and Kelly looked at them resentfully. What did we say that was so funny? Sophia waved her hands. Nothing, girls, nothing really. It's just that we were going to announce the same thing to you today, which is the same thing. Kelly, not understanding, stared at her mother. The women glanced over again. Well, we were going to introduce someone to you today too. Maria asked cautiously, but you're not getting married. Helen nodded her head, and she was. Kelly asked stupidly, really, and to whom? Sophia said I was marrying Kevin and Helen was marrying Peter. The girls looked at each other and suddenly laughed and rushed to hug their mothers. But that's great. That's just great. We'll all be married and happy. And let's have 4 weddings in one day. Sophia waved. Oh, you'll think of something. How's that? You're going to the store on the same day. Looks like we're going to have to set the table a lot more seriously today than we thought. Greg didn't make it to the wedding, but he called to say congratulations. Molly couldn't come because she was expecting a baby. All the men supported the girls' idea, and almost the whole town came out to watch when a real cortege of wedding cars marched down the street. No one here remembered such a thing, that 2 mothers and 2 daughters got married on the same day. Subscribe and click the bell. The thing is that at some point Molly began to study so sharply that on the personal order of the principal, she was allowed to take a few extra classes at school. And it so happened that by the time she was 16, she was graduating. But then he came into the life of their little family. Stephen, just one day, Nancy brought him to their house. Once they had a normal house, albeit not a rich one, a rented one too, but normal, and told him he was the new daddy and husband. Molly didn't like Stephen right away. He was insolent, rude, taught everyone who was weaker how to live, and hardly worked, but managed to find money for booze and cards. Molly refused to call him daddy, and that became one of the reasons for their feud. And then Stephen set Nancy up. Yes, Molly had no doubt that the bastard had planned the whole thing from the beginning, and that's why he'd gotten together with her mom in the first place, because she was a gullible fool. Stephen wanted to do some dirty deed with someone else's hands. So one day he said a friend of his working in Lombardy had asked him to resell some stuff. I'm busy at work, I'm loaded. He explained to Nancy. Here are the keys. My friend is on bedside duty for his sick grandmother, so he wants you to go to the pawn shop yourself, pick up the items, and take them to the buyer. Don't worry, everything's gonna be fine. Since that fateful nightmare that turned their little family's life upside down. It's been 2 years now, but Molly still couldn't figure out if her mother knew then what she was getting into in court. She would later, sobbing, assure her that she had been duped and had not suspected a thing. That day, Nancy told Molly that it was enough for her to give up. She needed to be an adult and help her family make money. Mom, I don't want to go anywhere. The girl tried to say no. I need to study. I want to go to university. I want to go to university. Yeah, now, pursed her lips. Nancy, you make me sound like a millionaire. There's a scholarship to pay for your studies, sighed Molly. I can do this, I know it. I can get a good job. Shut your mouth when your mother's talking. Don't you dare interrupt me. Nancy screamed. She always yelled when she was in a bad mood, except she yelled at her daughter, not her roommate, because she was afraid of Stephen. Maybe I wanted a lot of things too. And what did you get? Nancy continued her rant. I sold the apartment I was supposed to have as an orphan just to go to America. I thought I'd have a life here. Why do you think you're better than me? Nobody needs the smartest. And me, Nancy, sobbing. Then it got noisy. Nobody wants you. Then why didn't you go back? Molly asked. Nancy stiffened, then pressed her lips into a string for breathing hard. Her face flushed, and she flew over to the table where her daughter was studying. She knocked books off it with her hand. Don't you dare do that to your mother. Get ready to help. They got in Stephen's car, drove to the pawn shop, and then it got really bad. Anyway, it turned out that those keys were a copy, and the pawn shop owner, though he knew Stephen, had never authorized him to do anything. And as Nancy's mother carried out the last plasma TV, about to load it into the car, and Molly stomped along, she was carrying some kind of vase. The police showed up. Just some concerned neighbor called, realizing they were robbing a pawn shop. "Put your hands up," officer yelled. Pointed a gun at Nancy. She hesitated. How could you throw an expensive television set on the ground? She tried to explain to the police that she was merely fulfilling a request from her husband, who in turn had been asked by a friend. And she was later found to have stepped toward the police, even though she was told to stay where she was, and the officer opened fire. The lawyer they were provided for free said it was only because of this mishap that Nancy was able to avoid actual jail time. The police department was afraid of charges on her part, so they made some sort of agreement. Nancy doesn't have a claim, and the police chief makes a deal with the prosecutor. And because of the police officer's haste, Nancy is left disabled. The doctor said that it was a miracle that she was alive at all and could move her legs a little. They also said that theoretically they could do surgery, but it was so expensive, and even the most expensive insurance wouldn't cover it. And Molly and her mom had no health insurance at all at the time of the accident. Molly, by the way, she was sent to a special institution for juvenile delinquents for the duration of the proceedings because she was suspected of complicity. And although she was not beaten there, she was fed not badly, and the local psychologists supported her in every possible way. Those few months were the worst of her life. Molly knew that she was not a thief, she was innocent, and at the same time she felt like a real criminal. How ashamed she was to look people in the eye when they let her out of there. The real one who went to prison was Stephen. The police found that he had been involved in many burglaries in the neighborhood. And then Nancy and Molly had to leave home, moving into a small apartment, so-called social housing, for which they had to pay an extra $300 a month. And they hadn't paid it in 6 months. Almost all the cash had been eaten up by Nancy's medical bills. And now Molly was living in a new reality of need and guilt. She had to talk her mom out of this. After all, she hadn't liked the idea from the start. And then there was the despair. Molly was used to them buying the cheapest groceries they could find. And they're always cutting coupons out of newspapers to get a discount. There were still, by the way, food banks and some charities where they could get help. But Nancy wouldn't let Molly go there. "We don't need handouts," screamed the mother. "We'd rather die, do you hear me? I'm not gonna grovel." Molly's sticks only took her breath away in those moments. She almost hated her mom for Nancy's stupidity for getting involved with that Stephen. Molly was trapped. She was still only 16, even though she was supposed to be. She'd be 17 in a month, and a party with cake and presents was out of the question in their plight. In the second place, Molly understood that now the road to university and in general to independent life is closed for her because her mother is sick. She is an invalid, barely able to move small checkers with walking legs, and only if she took a horse dose of painkillers, which could not be taken in multiples. They had no money for a nurse, so Molly couldn't even go to work. She helped her mom change her clothes, bathed, cooked her meals, served her what she needed. For the first time, they survived on benefits, not even a wheelchair. The local disability service said that Nancy was at the back of the queue and would get a wheelchair in 4 years at best. Then Molly realized that it could not go on like this, and ignoring the scandals, she decided to get a job, and she succeeded. Her kind savior was Mr. Lee. He owns a Chinese store selling everything from instant noodles to dog food to construction tools. Usually behind the counter was Mr. Lee's daughter, Wee, or this young, smiling and open-minded girl who seemed to be 2 years younger than Molly. Her name translated as Beautiful Plum. They became fast friends. Sometimes, looking at how Wee communicates with mom and dad, how they are close, love each other like a real family, Molly felt heartache. She was tormented by white envy because her family was not like that. And then, to make some more money, Molly suggested to Mr. Johnson that she could fill in for Rick. He was their janitor, but he had retired. Mr. Jones snickered and said she would sweep the yard for 1,000 years to cover the rent debt. "I'll settle for withholding 50% of my wages," the girl and the landlord boldly replied. "I'm rounding my eyes, but I need cash, and I can do more than sweep the yard and paint the walls in the entryway. I can trim those bushes, get them in neat shape." Jones chuckled something about being cocky and savvy beyond his years. He agreed, and Molly had a plan ready. Yes, they need to pay their bills, of course. But Mom also really needs a wheelchair. Then she could get out for walks, and it would make her feel better. In addition, Mom will be less burdened. Molly will be able to get to the toilet, to the kitchen. Anyway, it was a necessity. "Look, guys, who do we have here?" A mocking voice brought Molly out of her musings on life, and she threw her head down. Immediately, paint rushed to her face, and her heart pounded faster, just like a bunny who spotted Alice coming. "What are you doing here?" Mary Archie Stone spat through his teeth on the ground, under the girl's feet, and grinned broadly. "So the janitor did. When are you gonna get that white trash out of here?" Archie was a local boy, from a good, not poor family. I think, as Molly knew, he was about 17. He was also a bully and the leader of his own little gang. True, since the neighborhood itself had relatives and generally all decent society would quickly put a stop to his activities. Archie and his henchmen usually went further out on the town. Afternoon. Molly decided that it was better to be polite and not to give in to provocation. She also remembered what her teacher once said in biology class: "If you meet predators, don't show them fear. They can smell it." Omni does not depend on the terms of resettlement of the house and its demolition. She answered with restraint. "Mr. Jones is in charge of all those matters." She was silent, looking at the asphalt, all the leaves in front of her. There were full trash cans standing nearby. The car that would pick them up wasn't expected until tomorrow morning. "I don't care," Archie bellowed, pitching forward and sending a new spitball under Molly's feet. "We don't need no criminals around here. You think we don't know what you and Mom are up to?" The kid grinned. "She got shot. Bet you steal alone. Now, you know, if he tries to clean out our house. My old man's got a Colt, and he's got a right to take you down." "Leave me alone," Molly exclaimed. She didn't mean it, but tears spurted from her eyes. "You have no right to say that. You don't know anything about me. Go away. I have work to do." She's got a lot of nerve. Archie's got a fist in his side from his brother Mark, a lad of about 12. "Why don't we teach her a lesson?" "That's a great idea," Archie laughed. "Come on, boys." Molly dropped her broom and swung her arms. A handful of scarlet leaves were thrown at her. Some of them caught on her hair and clothes, and then she resisted with all her might. But what could she do? A fragile 16-year-old girl against 4 boys united by anger and impunity. 2 of them brought Molly to her knees, and 2 of them tipped a trash can of plastic milk and juice bottles over her head. Fish giblets, scraps of toilet paper, flaccid greens, a wide variety of garbage, rolled the girl in a stinking wave. "Hey!" The friendly, lonely laughter of the boys was interrupted by a sharp shout from the opposite side of the street. "Let go of the girl." Molly threw tangled hair trying to get some of the sticky, slippery slime from the trash can. She saw a guy walking across the street toward them. A neighbor, I think. Yeah, that's right. He showed up in their neighborhood a couple weeks ago. A friend in an army uniform brought him in. He helped carry this guy's stuff into the house because this still mysterious neighbor limped badly on one leg and even used a cane sometimes. The house he moved into had been empty for years. And this guy, what was his name? Molly didn't know, but right now he was rushing toward her. And next to him was a German Shepherd dog. Mind your own business. Stepping up from the teenage gang was Mark. He was the smallest of them all and made up for it with a twinge of aggression. But the neighbor with the dog just ignored him. Apparently, he already knew who the leader was. One more moment, and he got Archie's arm. So the kid howled in pain. I see your parents made a mistake in your upbringing. In a quiet, commanding, and steely voice, the strange neighbor said, but that's how I remember them. You know that only losers with complexes who are nothing of themselves attack defenseless people in a mob. Archie Hanna, and honestly trying to free himself from a powerful grip. You don't know who you're messing with. Oh, believe me, I know perfectly well, grinned the boy. Your grandfather, Gregory Stone, is like this. Director of a summer camp for troubled teens. I know him, and I think he'll be thrilled that I'm going to tell him about you and show him. I videotaped the whole thing. You're lying, Archie muttered, but he wasn't sure. You didn't videotape anything. You're just intimidating me. You're risking a test. The neighbor raised an eyebrow. Here's the thing, guys. I know where you live, and me and Lulu. He nodded at the sheepdog. We ain't afraid of that kind. And we can give each and every one of you a hard time. But I also know you can't be rehabilitated so easily until you've had a good thrashing. They won't let you pass like the flu through the center. So I'm not gonna lecture you on the nature of good and evil. I just need you all to apologize to this young miss and stay away from her. I see. Two of the gang protested languidly, but Archie, whose shoulder looked like it was about to pop out of joint, yelled at them to do as the man ordered. I apologize with a sour face, Mark said. Behind him, two more kids repeated the same. Finally, Archie himself apologized to Molly. The free neighbor let go of the bully so sharply that he almost fell, and then, accompanied by his henchman, looking back with a mixture of fright and shame, Archie ran away. How are you? Asked the neighbor to Molly, who was still sitting on the pavement among the slop. Thank you, the girl mumbled. Give me your hand. He held out his palm to her, and she leaned up. Alex Milton. He introduced himself. Molly, she said, and then added, but that's it. My name is Molly. Alex repeated, thoughtfully, as if tasting her name is very beautiful and unusual. You are not Native American. I'm from Russia, answered the girl. My mom moved here a long time ago. And ours kicked our nose out. Thank you very much. Oh, she swayed slightly. She was dizzy. She must have been nervous. Also, her forehead felt oddly wet for some reason. And his tentacles. Molly ran her hand over her skin, looked at her fingers, and gasped. The tips were stained scarlet. Are you hurt? Alex exclaimed. And before Molly could react, he reached for her, brushing her bangs off the girl's forehead. Damn it. Well, who did it? He hissed angrily. They didn't touch me, she hastily explained. For some reason, suddenly for the passage, for the safety of the bullies. If this type with the features of the terrible night decides to find them, chase them down, and will undoubtedly succeed in doing so. Buck fell out of buck with everything else. She nodded down at the shards of glass jar, the sharp edge of one of which had ridden over Molly's head. You need to go to the hospital, Alex said. Let's call your parents. He frowned when she shook her head. I live with my mom, my dad doesn't. Then we should call your mom. Phone. Or shall we walk you to your apartment? No, sir. I mean Alex, Molly smiled shyly. Thank you. I don't know how to thank you, but I really don't need to go to the hospital. Molly wasn't aware of this. Should there be free care in cases like this? I guess even without insurance, she wouldn't have been kicked out the door. But even more than that, as creepy as it was to admit it, she didn't care about her own person. Lately, she had been perceived as aloof, as if she were a doll with arms and legs, capable of representing the primitive life of a human being. Molly looked around absent-mindedly. The trash would certainly be picked up now. But how to get home like this? Mom would ask questions, and Molly would rather go under than tell her what had happened. She must have gotten that look on her face, because Alex suddenly said, "Let me help you out here. And then are you afraid to go home?" As you guessed, she squinted. Actually, he chuckled. You just whispered under your breath. What's Mom gonna say? But she did. She shrugged and started picking up the trash. Why did you bother? Water. Distracted, Alex smiled. It was a spontaneous act of anger. From individuals with nothing better to do. Or do you have a serious conflict? When you go to the police, will I be a witness? No. Molly's eyes went wide. She turned pale. Not to the police. Okay, he replied, after a moment of ruling between them awkwardly in silence. No police. So you've recently moved here? She asked, to keep the conversation going. Lulu and I are going to live here now. At least for a while. Would you bow with your foot, sir? The girl said shyly. I don't want it to get more sore from fiddling with me. It doesn't hurt much anymore. Alex answered. But the doctor says that you have to use the cane for at least another year. The compound fracture broke like a lollipop. Pardon the details of the cough. He awkwardly. No, it's fine. I sympathize. Molly smiled shyly as the trash was collected, and they stood up. An awkward silence hung between them again. I'm not really a janitor, Molly said. I mean, I don't do it all the time. I want to go to college. Good choice, smiled Alex in a friendly way. And about working as a trash hauler or something like that. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Trust me, it's normal. Ashamed. Worth it for the likes of Archie and his accomplices. Yeah, I know. The girl averted her eyes. But I'm going to go. Stop. He caught her arm. Gently, but firmly. Your wound. If you don't want to go to the hospital, you should at least have it treated. Do you know what I mean? Molly's lips trembled. She wanted to say that she understood and wasn't stupid. She could also say that she didn't have a first aid kit at home and didn't have the money to go to the drugstore and buy what she needed, because Mr. Jones wasn't due for his paycheck for another week. In the meantime, she and her mom were living on what was left in the fridge. What about going to the minister or asking for a loan? He wouldn't say no, that's for sure. But for Molly it was unbearably shameful, because only last month and the month before last she borrowed from Mr. 3 times, and he, when she returned the debt, all waved away. Said you need more girl than pay back when you get back on your feet. And he kept paying her wages. Molly's lips trembled, and she blinked often from tears. Alex sighed to him. Not everything, but quite a lot was clear from this girl. She's clearly in a tight spot, and she doesn't feel like going home right now. Naturally, she feels just plain disgusted. After what happened, that's what Alex said. How about you come to my place? I have a first aid kit, and I know first aid. Why don't you tell me what happened? We'll drink sodas, eat pizza. You sound like a maniac. Luring the girl to put her in the basement, Molly blurted it out without thinking. How insensitive is it to say that to the man who saved you from a gang of hooligans? Oh, I'm sorry. I don't understand. But Alex, to her amazement, did not take offense, but laughed. Good girl. In general, to strangers, even if they are your neighbor's home, is better not to go so trustingly, right? He got serious. But if you believe me, I can promise you I'm definitely safe. And let's switch to you already. There was a contradiction in his words, or maybe the shadow of some strange joke, but Molly had a calming effect. All right, Sir Alex, but I'm going home first. I'm sick of the smell. And she's wrinkling her nose, and I'll be honest. And then I'll come to you, and we'll talk. Then I'm waiting, Alex nodded, taking the stairs of the house from the front door, with her key and padding with her mouse to the bathroom, and then to her room. Molly felt so stupid, really. For a 16-year-old teenage girl, you can hardly think of an activity more reckless than going. Eating pizza and getting to know her neighbor stranger. Even though he has a cute dog, the dog has nothing to do with it. Molly, even as she listened to the hairdryer, remembered an American maniac who had a charming collie dog and sometimes pretended to be sick, appealing to the pity of his gullible victims. Stupid, Molly said to herself, gathering her hair into a bun with a velvet elastic band. Changing into a warm, loose tracksuit, the girl dashed backward toward the front door from the large room that served as their mother's living room and bedroom. There came the latter's clear snoring. Here I am, Molly said cheerfully. 10 minutes later, the girl appeared on Alex's doorstep holding a pack of chocolate chip cookies still unopened. "That's what's important for dessert." She smiled shyly as she held out the sweet gift. "Thank you, with the Kosovo flavor," as if pleased Alex. "Come on in." His house was nice, but it felt nice. The man had moved in recently and hadn't settled in yet. Boxes of bags. At the girl's feet, she jumped out and started sniffing. "Hey, good girl." Molly squatted down with both hands and began scratching and stroking the cheerful muzzle, which the sheepdog was terribly pleased. "What kind of pizza shall we order?" "What do you think about Havana?" asked Alex. "Great," agreed Molly. "The soda in the fridge is a treat," he said, already switching to dictating the order to the operator. Walking into the kitchen, Molly pulled out a drink. 2 cans. She went back into the room and sat on the edge of the couch. "Raise your hand, please," said Alex, sitting down next to her. He was holding a first aid kit. "Yes, I washed it with soap and water," Molly replied. "It's not enough. You don't want an infection or an ugly scar, do you?" he hummed. And when she removed her hair, he quickly and easily treated the affected areas and applied a bandage. "I think you could use this," Alex added. Tapped his finger on the box he tucked everything he used into. "Thank you," Molly extended. It was clearly charity, and she was creeped out. How embarrassing. You bet. A man who can't buy what he needs at the drugstore. It's a walking disgrace. Another awkward pause was saved by the doorbell ringing, delivering a pizza puppy. How hard was it for Molly not to gorge herself on food? No, it wasn't that she and her mom were starving, but Nancy had just bought a mountain of canned pork and beans in one sauce with her last welfare payment, so ate pretty much just that interspersed with pasta and onion over a roast and crisped with the best sweet or savory. There was also tea and coffee in the house. In general, the diet did not shine refinement of flavors and balance. "Are you a military man?" suddenly asked Molly, when there was less than half of the pizza left in the silent treat. She noticed the photo card on the coffee table. Alex in a U.S. Army uniform, and another guy in the same one, standing side by side and smiling widely, with Lulu sitting at their feet. Alex's ex snickered. How many times had he been asked that question? And he'd been provided with different answers, mostly brief, polite ones, but ones that made it clear to the interlocutor that he didn't want to talk more on the subject. And then there was the truth, the one that changed a lot of things in his views on the world, the one that made him renounce a lot of things that seemed once the only true. He knew the girl only a little. She was essentially nothing to him. But somehow, suddenly with her, he realized what he wanted. He just had to tell the real truth that only a few people had ever been able to hear from him. And Alex spoke. He was born into a family of hereditary military men who had chosen this way since the war for the independence of the United States of America. And it was very rare for a family to go against tradition. But such a person was Alex's father, who decided that his vocation was big business, and he succeeded in it. He made a lot of money, and then almost lost everything. A few years ago, when Alex was a little more than 20 years old, his father died of cancer, and before his death he asked his son to join the army because family and its heritage is important. Alex had already graduated from university at that point. He wanted to be a chef. That was his dream. But he also gave his father his word. And so instead of the kitchens of Paris and Rome, Bangkok, and Mexico City, he ended up in the U.S. Army and on to the Mexican border. I thought that was cool. I had some good guys with me, with a sad smile, Alex said. The work was not easy. Every now and then we had to stop attempts to get across the border. These were illegal immigrants, and often it was about families who ran after the American dream, women, children, and sometimes old men, grown men. They gave the last of their money to dubious middlemen to help them cross the border as they hoped to live on the other side, all in different ways. But there were many dangers along the way. One was that these people risked falling into the hands of modern-day slave traders. We've had to deal with these cases, Alex said thoughtfully. Hardly anyone here thinks about what goes on out there. But soon I realized it can't be like that anymore. The thing is that Alex started to notice some strange things over time, as if some of the army chiefs were playing for the wrong team. Not that they cooperated directly with the bandits, but as if they turned a blind eye to a lot of things, not wanting to create unnecessary troubles for themselves. But no one listened to Alex, and at some point he was told to shut up. And then one day it became known to him that a group of illegal immigrants, mostly women and children, were going to cross the border. About 20 people, and actually in cooperation with the state police. The U.S. military had to prevent it, and then contact Mexican authorities to take care of their people. But suddenly the plans changed, and Alex, not willing to take anyone's word for it this time, decided to do a little investigation of his own. And he was horrified, because it turned out that these people at some point, while they were still on the territory of America, were going to be attacked by bandits belonging to a Mexican clan who were going to take them into slavery. Naturally, Alex rushed to his superiors. He tried to tell them that plans had to be changed immediately. People had to be rescued. "It's the Mexicans, son," the chief told him, a big military man sitting behind a desk in his luxurious office. "We take care to keep them out of our America. What do you care what happens to them next? Let them go home. And if something happens to them on the way back, well, did the commander smirk? They knew there were hungry quarters in the desert. They were idiots themselves." Alex was horrified at such cynicism and rage. This was coming from a man who called himself a great patriot of America and a fighter for its ideals of freedom. So how could he be so damn cruel to those unfortunate people who only by the entanglements of life had rushed after phantom dreams to a supposedly hospitable America? Alex knew that he must obey the order, but he also knew that he could not sleep peacefully afterward, having allowed such a misfortune to happen. And so, accompanied by his friend, the man from the photo, his name was Mike, Alex, under the cover of night, went into the desert. They found them, caught up with members of a Mexican crime syndicate, who were already preparing to load the frightened people into a truck. They told them they were under arrest. And then there was a fight with the Americans. There was a dog named Lulu. She too fought against the villains. But Lulu was badly wounded, and as a result, no matter how hard they tried afterward, the vet's deafened LO in one ear suffered then, saving the dog and its owner. Alex and Mike were not idiots, realized that alone here nothing cannot be solved to the end. That's why they called the migration police, as well as the FBI, and soon the help arrived. Unfortunately, almost all the bandits managed to escape, and the rest were seriously wounded and said they would sue the American army for shooting them, and in general not just try to stop them, but beat them up heartily. But Alex and his friend were ready to go to the end. In fact, they didn't expect to be declared heroes or to be even grateful. They just did what they had to do. But it came as a real shock to everyone. The fact that they, it turns out, now became even more guilty of having left the base unauthorized, attacked the citizens of Mexico. Alex and the boys were told that they were in big trouble, that they were going to be court-martialed. They were told they shouldn't have gotten involved, that they were interfering with some big investigation, and that if the bandits hadn't been spooked, it would eventually be possible to get to their big bosses. But Alex didn't see it that way. How could one know what was going on and not interfere? Call, allowing innocent people to be taken like cattle and sold like cattle. He was shocked, and for some reason he didn't believe that the Mexican authorities would have released the captives. But later, and then Alex thought, even if they would have released them later, what could have happened to defenseless children and women in the meantime? It was scary to think about. In general, the situation was the most difficult and gloomy. But suddenly, it turned out that Mike had some very good big connections. As a result, the friends went to a special agreement with the authorities. They tell everything they know about this human trafficking story, and they get almost nothing for it. But Alex, as the main instigator, had to leave the army. and he agreed because he was ready to resign. Disappointed with the U.S. Army, his friend Mike, who was an Army doctor, said he was going to retire too, just a little while before he retired. Alex spent the next few years traveling around hospitals. Many doctors said he wouldn't be able to walk at all, but there were those who took on the difficult fracture. Work as a cook, of course, he could not, but he managed to run a cooking block, which brought some money. And then there were the payments from the fund left by my father, almost all of which went to terribly expensive medical treatment. This house used to belong to my father, Alex said. He started by selling real estate, but he lived in this house himself, so he never sold it to anyone. It was a memory of when he was young, when my mom was still alive. Alex looked Molly in the eye. She died in childbirth. "I'm sorry for your loss," she answered, quietly, and thought about the fact that no matter how hard it was for her, but just how lucky she was to have her mom. True, she didn't have a father as caring as Alex, so they were kind of alike. Neither of them had a full family, and yet they were so different. "How did your family take it when you left the Army?" "They know what happened. Not everyone knows, and not everyone has accepted," grinned sadly Alex. "We don't talk much. I don't blame them. It's the way it is. Sometimes you need to separate from your family, but still be a part of it. It's hard to explain." Well, now he waved his hand and glanced at the last slice of pizza in the box, moving it over to Molly. "Here you go. I don't have much of an appetite. Now I just want to figure out what to do next. I want to get my leg all sorted out, and then maybe I'll sell the house after all. My dad said it's up to me. I'm gonna go work as a chef after all. Or maybe I'll open my own restaurant in Florida, just for tourists and locals. Nothing fancy. I want to be able to do a little more of everything myself. Something homemade, you know." Molly nodded. She talked to a lot of people, of course, and to her neighbors, but she had never had such frank conversations with anyone, except Mr. He often spoke of times past when he was a boy living with his father and grandfather in Hong Kong. And Lisa, she was an old lady, an immigrant neighbor from Poland, who still spoke almost no English. Molly often dropped by to help with the cooking. Mom, by the way, didn't approve of these visits, but Molly didn't care. Lisa was partly a substitute for her own grandmother, whom Molly had never known. And now, sitting next to Alex, scratching Lulu behind the ear, Molly talked about what was troubling her, what she was living. She opened up to him about how she'd had high hopes, and then everything had crumbled. How difficult it was now, and how sometimes it seemed to her that there was only the blackness of hopelessness ahead. "You and I have been betrayed in some way by the system that we believed was supposed to protect law and order in America," Alex muttered. "Drink." He gently touched Molly's chin with his fingers, lifting her head and meeting her gaze again. "But life goes on, you know. We don't have to give up. It can still be okay." "I'd like to believe it would." Sadly, the girl smiled. They talked some more about little things, like how Lulu likes to play in the dog park, and what the town was like in the olden days. And among other things, Molly mentioned that she and her mom had once been to a traveling circus. "I've never been there," Alex said, "but everyone seems to say the same as you, that it's something magical. I think we should go." "The traveling circus, but they've disappeared. But some of them are still traveling," Alex smiled. "The ghost moon has come to us. We have a traveling circus in town," Molly gasped. "And you missed this news." Alex raised his eyebrows. "They've put up a tent in the parking lot on the outskirts of the city. They've been here since a week, and they'll be here a little longer. Look, his eyes are screwed up. Why don't we go together tomorrow night?" "Yeah, it'll be fun," he added, noticing Molly's hesitation. This invitation was like a gust of fresh breeze for her. Really, what else to do after Yuli's shift, sitting around all evening, listening to the TV blaring? Nancy liked to have a quiz night. This was not at all to be desired, so Molly decided to be cheeky. Tomorrow, she would ask Mr. Lee for a couple of $12 in advance, just enough for a ticket and something to eat at the circus. "Deal," she said. Alex. When Molly got home, she did the same thing she always did to make dinner. Took care of her mom. And then, plucking up her courage, looked through the stack of emails about overdue bills and sorted them into 3 piles. Resolve urgently, probably be able to negotiate an installment plan, and something that could be ignored for tomorrow. For now, she had to get up early. So Molly decided to go to bed early. And what was surprising this time, she wasn't even disturbed by the loud sound of the TV. And the dream she had that night was amazingly strange. Molly saw herself as beautiful. And judging by the look of the people around her, her own specially styled hair, it was the 1930s. She was a horsewoman in a sequined red dress rushing on horseback through the arena of a traveling circus, and the audience squealed with delight. And then her horse was lifted up under the very dome of the tent, and there they had to walk on a thin rope. And in Molly's dream, it seemed to be business as usual. She went, rubbed at the horse with her heels against its flanks. But the mare suddenly reared up, gave a shrill neigh, and Molly realized in horror someone had cut the insurance, and if they started to fall, they would crash. Terrified, she whirled her head around. For some reason, the lights in the circus began to kick, 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 and the screams of the audience were replaced by some kind of evil laughter. And suddenly Molly saw the circus owner below her. For some reason, today he was dressed as a clown, except that the expression on his mask was unkind, and the colors on it were split. It was as if they were trying to wash them off with a dirty rag. Suddenly, there was a deafening silence. And then a merry circus tune played, which sent goosebumps down to the bones. And then a bright beam of light was directed at the clown. And then he threw up his arms, and they extended for many meters, attempted to grab Molly the horse, which was desperately flailing from side to side, on the tiny platform under the dome, risking to fall off at any moment. "Gerda, stop, look out," shouted Molly, realizing that if the crazy clown grabbed them, they would be finished. Then his hands closed around Molly's leg and dragged her down. She screamed and woke up. It was already shining outside the window. The sun must be in a nightmare. She thrashed around because the alarm clock appeared to have been dropped on the floor and her feet were tangled in the blanket. "It's okay. It's just a dream," mumbled to herself under her breath. Molly walked to the bathroom for now, where she splashed cold water in her face for a long time and then brushed her teeth twice. The taste of roasted peanuts and cotton candy stuck in her mouth just a little bit, reading the entire space in a nightmare. The circus. Well, of course, she just now remembered that she and Alex had agreed to go there tonight. Might as well back out. That's another silly thing to say out loud, Molly thought to herself, deciding that in a couple hours the aftertaste of the bad dream would dissipate and they'd have a good time, and she'd have plenty of cotton candy and peanuts. Make breakfast for Mom and make sure she takes all her meds. Nancy has been grumbling lately that she is hopeless and all this fiddling is for nothing. Belinda's getting ready for work. Is it a good day? She smiled as she walked through the door of the store. The bells hanging above her bent habitually. "What's up?" Molly asked, alarmed. Mr. Lee, his wife. And there were 2 of their relatives here. You could see everyone had been crying recently. Master Song's wife whipped around and held out her arms to Molly. In a breaking voice, she announced that their daughter were missing. "How is missing?" shocked, Molly asked. It turned out that the night before last hadn't come home. She had been let out for a walk with her friends. They were girls from well-known neighboring families. They were going to see a traveling circus, and they had a good time there. Even sent her parents a picture on her phone. Here she is standing at the shooting gallery holding her prize-winning plush panda. And then at some point, the girls split up. 2 went to the fortune-telling tent, and 3, which included us, went to the mirror maze, and she didn't come out of it. The friends first thought that we thought to pass this frightening attraction with crooked mirrors once again, and when she got held up, they tried to call her, but she couldn't get through. The girls offended the whole circus, asked its employees and other guests. Then they turned to their parents, and those already went to their parents. They called all the acquaintances, and in the morning they turned to the police. They said my girl must have run away from home on her own. In a colorless voice, Song recounted. They said teenagers do that a lot. But our kind or not, she could never run away with any guy. She was learning my sweet, kind Weor. It was only yesterday evening that the police deigned to take a missing girl report. And that was only after Mr. Lee reminded them that his daughter was a minor. The cops went to the circus, talked to everyone there, including its owner, one Fred, nicknamed the Laughing Ghost Clown. Yes, the circus owner was also its main clown, and his act closed each show. Fred expressed sympathy and added that his circus, his brainchild pricelessly different with an impeccable reputation, and this whole investigation could interfere with his business. So unless the police had a warrant for all this activity, they'd better not interfere with the show, and especially not hold up Ghost Moon any longer at all, because the circus was planning to leave for another city soon. And I thought they'd be with us for a long time, Molly said. Strolling circuses don't have to keep promises. Minister Lee shook his head. I guess they can't collect much here. So they're in a hurry to go where the public will like them better. Molly, my dear. The elderly Chinese man shook her hand warmly. The store is not open today, so you have the day off. With another expression of sympathy, Molly went outside. The good mood was washed away like rain. She had always been her best friend. And what could have happened to her in such a crowded place? Molly absent-mindedly walked home. Where else was there to go if the workday was canceled, when suddenly, walking through the alleys, she suddenly noticed a strange picture. Actually, there was nothing strange about meeting one of those bully boys. Molly would have preferred to leave as soon as possible to avoid being seen by them. But right now she was witnessing a strange sight. Archie's brother was standing in the alley, pounding his fists into the brick wall, swearing foully. Hey, are you crazy? Molly threw herself at the boy, grabbing his arm. Knuckles cracked. Marks on the wall. Kids had some serious healing time. Are you doing this? And she, grabbing him by the shoulders now, turned him around to face her and gave him a gentle shake. If Molly were asked what she was doing right now, she wouldn't be able to answer. Why would she even care about the man who, along with the others, was bullying her? But maybe the point was that this person was still, in fact, young, only 12 years old, and the fact that in his scolding, interspersed with his sobs, you could hear the genuine desperation of a man whose life had suffered something terrible. Mark froze, rounding his eyes, clearly shocked by her interference. None of your business, he shouted and pulled out of her arms. Leave me alone. At the last words, the boy cried again and began rubbing his eyes angrily with his fists. Archie's brother. Brother is missing, and no one cares. A vague bad feeling stirred in Molly's chest. What do you mean Mark's missing? Looked at her Volchenko from the underlying stocking schmug bent nose and spoke. It turned out that 2 days ago, Archie went on a date with his school girlfriend to a traveling circus. And there they had a falling out. He thought she was flirting with a magician. They went their separate ways. Then the girlfriend decided to reconcile, but she couldn't find Archie. It was like he'd vanished. She ran around the circus until it closed, but all she could find was his cell phone. He'd dropped it by the old cages. They used to hold tigers and other animals. But ever since the Animal Welfare Act banned traveling circuses, they've been empty, and now only animal figures made of papilla Molly and fake fur sat in the cages in the ghostly moon. Dad and the police think Archie's in trouble, so he ran away. He'll do time and come back. Mark finished the story, but he didn't. He was stolen by an evil clown. What clown? Re-questioned Molly, who had a bad feeling. Already it had gained, tickling and icy paws, getting to her neck. This circus be damned. In a colorless voice and looking past her, Mark replied, It's been going on for 100 years, but nobody cares. Wait, she had to intercept his hand again. But this time, Mark didn't lash out and quickly calmed down. I'm fine. You can't be fine, Molly said. What the hell is going on? First Mylan. Now your brother. Who's us or my friend? She disappeared the day before yesterday. She was at the circus too. So that's proof. Mark opened his eyes wide. He was breathing hard and looked a little crazy. I'm right, but no one believes me. Hardly anyone believes an evil clown stealing his teenagers, Molly said thoughtfully, but immediately frowned. Her mother loved to watch crime shows, and you'd be privy to all sorts of nasty stuff that shook America from time to time. So Molly could say that crazy clowns existed in reality too, but in their quiet little town and in plain sight in a traveling circus. You told that to the police, said Mark, pressed his lips together. They laughed. My father said I should see a doctor. But it's true. That's how Molly sighed. To begin with, you do need to see a doctor. You've seen your hands. You need a ride home. What am I, a little kid? You think this is a circus, Mark. But he looked kind of scared. If there are missing teenagers in town, I'd be careful walking around. You walk alone. Makes sense, Molly chuckled. It's just that there are no counselors. Who needs me? By the way, I'm the one Mark slapped. Awkward. I think I owe you another apology for that incident. Are you forgiven? Molly replied. Let's go. Do you happen to have a first aid kit at home? Careful, asked Mark. How will my mother see me like this? She'll realize you're hurt anyway, Molly remarked. But of course, it looks very picturesque now. And I have a bird. But my mom doesn't like visitors. But I think I know who we can visit. In general, Molly doubted that it was a good idea to drag the kid without asking to Alex, who had shaken him up yesterday. But what else was there to do? And at the same time, Molly decided to tell him that she didn't want to go to the traveling circus anymore, even if there are no evil clowns in nature. But still, after what happened, it was misfortune to misfortunes. Alex was surprised, but at the door to the guests did not indicate Lulu's place, pulled back the dog, which sounded on the boy. Mark, clearly embarrassed at the state and who he had come to see, volunteered to handle his own hands. But after nearly knocking over the bottle, Agnes on the couch, Alex told him to sit still and quickly deftly covered both hands under bandages. Pizza like a mouse was not offered, but brought 3 cans of fruit soda from the refrigerator. Molly excitedly recounted what had happened, and I knew they wouldn't stop at one person. They always do, Mark blurted out. Look, I understand what's going on with you, Molly said. But to believe it seriously. Wait a minute, said Alex. He looked at Mark carefully. Can you explain in detail? What's the story with the damned circus? What do you believe him? Molly rolled her eyes. Boy. Meanwhile, with hands trembling with pain and excitement, he unzipped his school backpack and pulled out a folder, opened it, and dumped it on the coffee table. Calculus scholarly notes, worksheets, and copies of some ancient newspaper articles. Here Mark began to explain, going through his wealth. Last year, we were assigned to write something on the history of the city. I thought it would be cool to make the subject the 1920s, jazz and gangsters and all that. And then I found this. I poked my finger into the yellowed from Time, or rather, his copy of the newspaper. It was an article that told of the disappearance of the 2 children of 14-year-old twin sisters April and Peggy. They had disappeared in 1925 when they had gone on a holiday to the fairgrounds, and there was a traveling circus nearby. It's not the only case. It's hard. Mark several times a year where this circus showed up, and people disappeared, almost always teenagers. No trace of them was ever found. The police would close the cases, but there's an urban legend. Mark looked around at his listeners, all 3 of them, because Lulu was sitting on Fauchette's point as if she could understand something. The legend said that the Ghost Moon Circus was once not cursed, and even on the contrary, it was the best. People smiled, cheered, and became kinder wherever its performers went, and even the lions and tigers in it were remarkably intelligent and docile. They never bit the trainers. In those good times, the first owner and founder of the circus was Albert Schwartz, a German-born magician. He was lonely, no wife, no children. He saw the circus as his child and the meaning of his life. And then love came into his life. She became a beautiful acrobat, Sabrina. But here's the trouble. She joined the circus not alone, but together with her husband, tamer of predators named Jack. Jack was a sweet, but just plain saintly guy. And he didn't notice the romance that had erupted between Sabrina and the owner. However, a sense of duty prevented Sabrina from finally leaving Jack. The poor woman tossed between the voice of reason and the voice of the heart. Albert suffered too. And then one day in one town he met an old woman. She was said to be a great fortune teller and a real sorceress too. Albert asked her to join the circus, but she said that tricks and jokes were too small for her, that she served other forces. "I can see the weight on your heart," she told Albert as he was about to leave. "I can help you if you are willing to pay the price the darkness will exact for the fulfillment of your wish." Albert was ready for all the gold. He had money. Maybe he should give it all up and become like an ordinary farmer. Maybe he should renounce his trade to get the love of his life. "No, you fool." The old woman laughed. "Let your circus live on. It's better that way. You'll have your beautiful artist, and you'll be together. But know that if you voluntarily lose what was yours, there will be a reckoning, and then not only you, but your descendants will pay tribute until the end of time." Then the old woman performed some terrible magic-filled ritual. Albert returned to the circus. He was full of bright hopes. After all, he hadn't wished for anything bad. He just wanted love. But at the circus, he got some terrible news. A tiger had attacked Jack. Sabrina was a widow. But Albert too. Pogorelov, the glorious worker. He quickly consoled her, and they played a wedding. True, many artists and circus workers said that it was too hasty. It was not all to the good. Everything was fine for a few months, and every show drew crowds. Then two things happened. Albert, who now had a family, was seriously thinking about his health and decided to go to the doctor to make sure his children would be healthy. He was worried because many men in his family had heart problems, and it could be hereditary. But at that clinic, they told him that he had no heart problems, but he did have a problem having an heir. The doctors did some tests and said Albert was infertile. How sad he was to return to the circus, and there was happy news waiting for him. Sabrina told him she was pregnant. They were going to have a baby soon. It hadn't been that long since she'd been widowed. Albert thought, so there could be a baby. And it's definitely Jack's. "You wretch." Albert was furious. "It's not my baby. I disown him, and I disown you too, you filthy wench." That same evening, there was to be a performance. Sabrina was doing her signature act, flying under the dome of the tent. And it so happened that she must not have checked her safety harness properly, because in an instant the girl fell off and crashed. But before her eyes closed for good, she managed to whisper, bowing, that we were all over her. "Alberto is your baby. I loved only you. Why did you deny what was yours?" The pain of loss was monstrous, but even blacker and more nightmarish was what Albert suddenly realized. The old woman's curse was coming true. He was being punished for accepting the help of the forces of darkness. And that very night, as legend has it, a creature appeared to the circus owner in a form so terrible that history has not preserved its description. And it's said that from now on, every few years Albert and his descendants, those who would own the circus after him, would pay tribute with human sacrifices. Mark finished the story. "But how can it be like that?" Molly asked. "It's not like he had no children left. He adopted an orphan boy," Mark explained, "and raised him as a clown. And since then, it is believed that victims are lured and sacrificed by the one who plays the role of a clown in the circus. And in this way, the circus owner pays tribute to the forces of darkness and protects his circus from ruin. That's it." Molly was overwhelmed with emotion. It was strange, but she was almost physically sickened by what she heard. And memories of her own nightmare came flooding back. "It's just an urban legend," she finally said. How many of them are there? Well, yes, Mark said with a snicker. It's easy to say that until you have a loved one missing. Am I missing us, or was she my best friend? Wait a minute. Alex held up his hand. Let's keep our emotions to ourselves. All right. Now we need to pull ourselves together and decide what to do. But what can we do? Molly ran her fingers through her hair and gripped it nervously. The police are working. They have to find any mistakes. They have to find Haley and Archie. What are you doing? She asked Alex, who had opened the laptop on the coffee table and started typing rapidly. Testing some crazy theory. Give me 10 minutes. Okay. Finally, after 10 minutes, he turned the laptop screen to his guests. Alex's own face became very serious. Look, I compared the routes where the Ghost Moon Circus has performed in the last 10 years with the statistics missing persons. And what did you find out? Molly asked, already anticipating what the answer would be. Where they showed up, the missing people were teenagers between 12 and 18, sometimes someone older or younger. And actually, it could all be a coincidence. People go missing before the circus arrives and after they leave. Except in this case, each time, someone who went missing went to their show, or was just in the vicinity of the circus parking lot. For a few minutes, the small group was silent. It was broken only by Lulu. The dog retreated to her bowl of dry food. Of course, I could turn all this over to the police, said Alex thoughtfully. But as you understand, they are unlikely to like the version with a long-standing curse of a traveling circus and tales of sacrifice. But I can also try to figure it out myself. That's what I'll do. Alex stood up, and now his face expressed determination. In the evening I'm going to the circus. I'll see how it is. I'll jump in with you. Mark, you're not going there alone, Molly exclaimed. It might be dangerous. I'm going with you. Are you? She pointed her finger at Mark. Go home and stay home tonight. Why does a girl have more right to do that than me, pouted the kid. I'm almost 17 and you're 12. So what? I'm the best Boy Scout. That's what Grandpa says. I can tie all the knots and start a fire without matches. Good for you, Alex, patting the kid on the head, but he dodged the angry wolf. But she's right. Children don't belong there. You've already helped us a lot by telling us everything. And you. All right. Alex nodded to Molly. But you'll stay out of sight and go away and call the cops if I tell you to. Deal. Molly nodded. Mark glared resentfully, but obediently went to his room. Before going to the circus, Molly had to go home and feed her mother dinner. Where do I disappear all day long? Nancy asked resentfully. Yes, the girl answered evasively. Just different things to do. You probably sleep and see how you can become an adult as soon as possible. And then I'll be thrown into an asylum for the handicapped. He hissed to Nancy, rising from the bed. She froze, barely leaning on Hodinka, while her daughter changed the bedclothes for clean ones. Don't be silly, Molly replied tiredly. I'm not going to leave you. That's what I believed, Nancy grinned. If you became an invalid and I had a chance to start over. She stopped talking abruptly. What are you, a mom? Molly V knocked down a pillow, straightened up, and met her gaze. You threw me out. Nancy, I, pursing my lips, turned away. It looked like she was about to cry. You know, you already did, didn't you? Mom said to the girl when she brought Stephen home. You didn't care that there was an ex-con, a grown, strange man living next to your teenage daughter. You know, Mom, I'm sorry you had an accident, but I guess it was fate's price for you to finally realize how gullible you were. Okay, I'm settled. Go to bed. Go to sleep. Where are you going? Nancy stretched out in a completely different tone. She lay down and now began to make herself comfortable. Where are you going at night, daughter? I'm going out with a friend, shouted Molly already from the corridor, threw on over the net dress, jeans, her jacket. Daughter, don't go, came the voice of Nancy's mother. She was crying again. Don't leave me alone. What friend? Don't go anywhere. Stay. Molly tried not to listen to it. She left the apartment, locked the door on the key beside her mother. The phone was left on the table. A thought flashed. If she didn't come back, if all this nonsense with the circus curse and the clown maniacs turned out to be true, Mom could call the landlord to open the door from the other side. Hold on, or am I going to go looking? Molly whispered, heading downstairs. Just 2 steps later, the entryway door swung open. She stepped out into the street. The air was noticeably cooler. Scents that spoke of the imminent fall were carried in it. The sun was already touching the horizon in a ruby scarlet ball. Preparing to duck behind the mountain range, Molly smiled. A perfect evening to go to the traveling circus and get as full of cotton candy and roasted peanuts as the last time. If Molly had come here for any other purpose, just to have a good time, she would have gasped with delight from the first step into the world of Ghost Moon. Holding hands, she and Alex walked through a gate that depicted the giant open mouth of a werewolf, who glared at every visitor with light bulb eyes and laughed ominously. Lulu was against her custom. She was an obedient, intelligent dog and needed no restraints whatsoever. She was out now, nodding at her master's feet on a leash. It had to be. That was why she seemed so tense to Molly. Or the dog felt angry. Not that Molly was ready to actually believe the stupid scare story, but something evil was definitely going on. Strawberry or vanilla? Alex's question brought her out of her reverie. They stopped at a tent selling cotton candy. Strawberry was Molly's answer. What, she noted after a moment. To say the least. And they make a good one here. It's the best I've ever had in my life. Circuses like this used to be sometimes the only entertainment in the provinces. Alex, bearded women, snake men. The heaviest man was a female mermaid, and there were all sorts of outlandish ones. Some were real, of course. A developmentally disabled person, he sighed. But there were even more who could skillfully pretend. My great-grandfather loved going to one of the last of these circuses, but it wasn't a ghost moon. Molly asked. No, smiled Alex. Something, I think, much safer about a shooting gallery. Do you want to win something for you, or shall we go? Find out from the fortune teller. What's in store for us? I'm not amused. I'm not saying it's funny. He lowered his voice, but we have to start somewhere. You think this is even real? The police were probably looking all over the place. Who knows? Shook his head Alex. Lulu. What do you think? He sat down in front of the dog and with a deft magician's movement, took out of his pocket and shoved a rag under his nose. What is it? Molly asked Wanda. It's Archie's. Mark gave off his scent. Lulu might be able to pick up the trail. Although here in so many days, of course, all interrupted by other odors. Shook his head Alex. But if my theory turns out to be correct. What theory? Molly couldn't even guess how they could try to be detectives here, other than just walking around, hoping for a lucky break. You've heard of the fact that when a person is really scared, their body releases specific fear hormones. They say that's why you can't be afraid. If you meet a cunning beast, he just smells it and will realize that you are weak, that you are a willing victim. Molly nodded. She had heard something like that. And Alex continued. Turns out it wasn't just the gang she was on Archie the day the guy went missing. She was on him at the moment when the brother's father came home and gave the eldest nobody. I mean Archie a big scandal for taking money without asking. He threatened to send his son to a camp for troubled teens, and Archie was very scared. I don't think he was scared when he first came here with his girlfriend. The guy expected to have a good time tonight. Alex finally revealed his idea. But when something bad happened to him, he was probably scared. And you think we should look for the smell of fear? Molly gasped. You're a good thinker. Alex winked cheerfully at her. The cops took from the guy's parents some of his clothes and gave them to the search dogs. But it was probably something ordinary. But Bogdan Archie left it in his room. He decided that he needed to look cool for his girlfriend tonight and decided, as Mark said, to style his hair in the style of the 60s. It's a trend right now among young people. But you know, it started in the front. Anyway, That's what I want Lulu to try looking for. I want her to look for someone who is not just a guy, but someone who is literally imbued with fear. I don't know how possible that is, but there's a chance that's why the dogs haven't found anything before. Lulu girl, what do you say? Let's get to work. Sheepdog, hitherto noisily inhaling the one her canine creature, him available scents poked loudly, pulling away from the bondage. Alex stood up, tucking the stuff back into his pocket. Look for it, he told Lulu, and she pulled them into the depths of the circus. It was basically a jumble of individual, modeled striped tents, with mobile drink and snack stands moving between them, as well as huge inflatable figures depicting characters that celebrated the ghostly moon. 10 years ago, Molly, when passing by one of these figures, had wondered how it was that none of the boys had ever gotten the hooligan idea of stabbing one of these figures with a needle. Or had they? That must have been fun. Serves them all right, she thought. If these circus performers had anything to do with the disappearance of Thought and Archie, the sheepdog deftly maneuvered among the strollers across the huge field the circus occupied. Alex and Molly followed her, but suddenly Lulu slowed down and stared at one spot of the marquee labeled "No Trespassing Bill Bear's Property." You think it was her, she exhaled excitedly to Molly, and clung tighter to Alex's arm. She'd dropped the cotton candy somewhere along the way, but she'd already forgotten about it. I have no idea, but I don't think it could be any worse. If I ask this Mr. Bill, Alex said thoughtfully. After all, I don't think anyone here would be surprised that people ask such questions. The reporters here are probably sick of asking questions. Freud forbids us to talk to the press. A rough voice came from behind them. The whole trio turned around and raised their heads because the man in front of them was more than 2 meters tall. It was a man about 40 years old, dressed in pull-on striped tights, bald as an egg, but with a lush, long mustache. He stood with his arms folded across his chest, looking wary, threatening. At the same time, he asked Alex. The former private border guard answered taut calmly and did not look away. And she is definitely not a cop. Verzilla grinned. Did you pass on a child's ticket? Little girl. Actually, I'm almost 17. Molly took a chance. Your brother shouldn't let you meddle in adult affairs. The big guy rubbed his chin thoughtfully. He's not my brother, said Molly. We're just friends. Good friends squinted at the man in tights. Reliable friends. Otherwise you wouldn't risk coming here together, knowing what they say about this place. And here Molly realized on her own skin what the expression meant. Her heart sank into her heels. She looked around, and there are plenty of people around. They can't be in danger right now, can they? Although for missing mine and Archie's, this place wasn't safe at all. Let's talk out of earshot. The big guy nodded at the tent. My name is Bill, and I think we can be of use to each other. The tent turned out to be a cramped and motley dressing table, retro-style posters, a few soft peaks on the walls, a rug on the floor and pillows scattered about, some huge weights and a barbell. Part of the show, Bill explained. People are interested in looking at how the stars' real lives in the trailer. They're behind the park. He waved his hand to have a seat. He set the example by sitting right down on the floor. I don't offer you anything to drink, because you wouldn't risk it anyway. You don't know me, right? He grinned. Molly and Alex looked at each other, but they accepted the invitation and sat down. Alex unhooked the leash from Lulu's collar. Your dog is looking at me strangely. Bill noticed her. Brought to your father the smell from the missing boy Archie's belongings. Alex answered, and Bill nodded. He looked very calm. In Molly's opinion, it is impossible to be calm for someone who could be involved in such a heinous crime as the kidnapping of teenagers. But for some reason, he didn't seem dangerous. I mean, he didn't seem dangerous. And Alex, he wouldn't be so trusting of someone who could be dangerous, would he? I'm glad you came, Bill said. This has to end, and it has to end now, while they're still alive. Luce and Archie. They're here, aren't they? Molly lunged forward, and Alex barely caught her in time. What are you doing with them? Wildcat stretched his lips in a smile. Bill has to be careful with her. And you think it's my fault. But you know, said Molly, who still wanted to claw at Bill with her bare hands and shake the truth out of him. I didn't care that he was 5 times heavier than she was and knew more and unfortunately didn't know what to do with that knowledge. But then you showed up, he said in a way he didn't understand at all. Lulu was quietly mesmerized. Then the time was right. Now here to explain what's going on. How are you involved in this? And how are we going to be damned here to save the children? Alex shouted in her tone. And Bill spoke. It was an alias in honor of the legendary enforcer of the early 20th century, Bill Grizzly. The real name of the man sitting in front of them was William. And he had joined the circus 2 months ago when Ghost Moon was passing through a town in Texas. William had left his father's farm, wanting a change of scenery after a rough divorce. At first everything was fine. He got along well with the other performers. And the circus owner Fred seemed like a good-natured, fun-loving little guy. But gradually Bill began to notice that something strange was going on at Ghost Moon. Sometimes, when they were on the road, they would stop for a while, and Fred would meet some strange people. To Bill, these types reminded him of gangsters. And one day, when he looked up the details of his act, Bill happened to notice Fred hiding a gun in a cache, and something told him that it wasn't a sham. You know, when I realized that I looked like my legendary predecessor, I decided that I needed to learn as much as I could about the history of the circus in order to match the images, to bring atmosphere to my act. You see, I started researching the history of Ghost Moon in here. Anyway, at first I thought, of course, this is nonsense. Urban legends we know about the curse, this sacrifice story. Carefully interrupted Bill Molly. He nodded and continued. Before the circus went to this town, Bill began to notice that his master was not at all well. Although it could be partly put down to the fact that the circus had a lot of debt, that Fred was deep in credit, but the owner was behaving very strangely, calling someone, and then hastily stopping talking. If any of the staff were in the neighborhood, he'd meet strange people again. And then the other day I saw him carrying a plate of food, and he said Bill Freud is struggling with his weight. He's on a diet, and there's hamburgers, fries, sodas, and he was carrying it over to where we keep the old props that we don't use for their intended purpose anymore, but sometimes put out for decoration. You know, like those cages with the animal figures. And I realized it wasn't my business, but I decided to keep track of it there as well. Anyway, we have a big box like that. Bill spread his hands. It's where they used to hide the Wolf Man for the show. I saw Fred dump food in a bag and a bottle of soda in there. And then he left. And I looked into the vents, and there was a man looking at me. Someone was trapped in the box. I didn't realize who it was. But then the next day, the cops came to the circus. They were asking about the missing boy. I put one thing together, and I was sure Bill's voice shook. He sighed and continued again calmly. You know, at first I thought maybe Fred put someone in there as punishment. You know, he has his own strict system of discipline. We have a magician. His name is Stuart. And a couple times, this guy came out drunk. Fred gave him a choice. He's gonna take the fines out of his paycheck, or Stuart's gonna follow him around on all fours and bark like a dog for 24 hours after every time. Yeah, that's not normal. But I thought maybe one of us had done something wrong. I decided to check that spot just in case. Again, there was no one there. The drawer was empty, but I found this. With that, Bill pulled a scrap of clothing out of his pocket. It was a pocket torn from a leather jacket. Mark said his brother had put on a new black cash register. Molly Lulu that evening. Interestedly, she reached forward with her nose and circled the find and slid in quietly. She recognized it. Alex said and demonstrated it to Bogdan. It belonged to that Archie kid too. And then she disappeared the next day. The girl continued. Bill, his gaze darted to the entrance of the tent. Behind him, someone passed by. And I wondered again what it could be. And I also decided to talk to ours. But I don't think anyone had been punished by Fred lately. But I figured, why would anyone share such slick details with me? And yet it still kept me in suspense. But you could report it to the police. Molly waved his hands. It's so easy. You don't think that idea hadn't occurred to me? Bill chuckled. But Freud called me to him after the second incident at our circus, supposedly just to talk about business, about life. And he told me casually that sometimes the police cover up criminals, like the mafia and those who try to interfere. Bill, it's hard. Something could happen to them, and no one would help. Fred knows I suspect something, so he's decided to shut me up. But I'm gonna search the circus again tonight before we leave. And if I find someone, it doesn't matter. You and me, Alex said. You believe him? Molly gasped. Don't you think it's a trap? Yes, shrugged Alex. But we have a way out. He's our only ally in this damn place. But to make you feel more comfortable, and here he shifted his gaze to Bill, I want you to know that I told a friend of mine. He's retired military too, but he's gonna talk to someone. He's gonna do some digging, and I think he'll be in town by morning. So if something were to happen to us, well, we trust you, but we're not defenseless, gullible lodders. And that's a good point, because I don't know what we're all facing. Your dog, he nodded at Lulu, he's gonna sink his teeth in. If it comes down to a fight with the bad guys, my girl will be just happy to do it. Alex grinned and patted the sheepdog behind the ear. We had to wait a couple hours. Bill had to go away to perform his number, and also to jokingly rub in style with the circus guests, to take pictures with everyone. But finally, he was back. He had to fulfill his duties right today and now. Otherwise, his absence would certainly be noticed by the host. There's only one other place. I think only Fred knows about it, because it's all his and me, because I seem to know the most about the history of this circus. Bill led his companions an elaborate path, so as not to run into Fred. He led them to where the props were stored. You see, the motor home is a vintage 50s model. Fred said he wanted to restore it so he could drive it around the country one day when he retired. Until then, it's under lock and key. But I think it's someone very serious. Bill frustratedly tugged on the new lock on the door. I can do it. Alex pushed him aside, and then took something out of his pocket and started fiddling with the lock. A couple minutes later, there was a quiet click and the lock was opened. Hey, there's the one who looked inside first, Bill. Oh, burst out from him amazed, and Alex and Molly filed inside the van. There among the old junk, handcuffed to some fixtures in the walls on an old mattress thrown on the floor, sat Soap and Archie. The teenagers' mouths were like shadows around shawls, but ripping them off was a matter of a couple of seconds. Quietly, sternly commanded the captive, "Don't make any noise." He nodded at Bill. "Friend, and we'll get you out now. Please be quiet for the babbling. I want to mommy and daddy, everything will be okay." Molly helped her friend up. The poor thing could barely stand on her feet. "Can you walk, boyfriend?" Bill asked Archie. And the teenager nodded. "Where did he come in?" "Archie." "Who?" Molly asked. Fred rounded Archie's eyes. "He's always around. He's a psycho, a maniac." Suddenly, the doorway to the van was blocked by the figure of a man. "A maniac? How rude. I guess you young man never understood what I was trying to tell you." Alex, Bill, Molly, Archie. They turned around in horror and froze, because Albert was pointing a gun at them. "Listen." Alex turned to him. "Don't do anything stupid. The police are on their way." The police smirked at Fred. "These fools don't understand anything." Ah, the circus. Anything can happen in it, and to anyone. It's a realm of magic. Except Fred's face was sinisterly contorted with malice. "Who says magic is only good? Don't worry, my dear guests. By the time the police get here, there won't be a trace of you. They won't find you. I know how to hide what I need to hide." Boss Strongman, raising both hands, stepped forward carefully, blocking his new acquaintances with his own body. "You're an educated man. Damn it. How can you believe in him? Damn it." Fred asked confusedly, and his face took on a thoughtful expression for a moment. And then he laughed. "Do you think I need this couple to be sacrificed? Well, do I look like an idiot to believe in a town scarecrow? No, my lovelies. It's much simpler than that." Fred's suddenly more serious. "Do you know how much a man is worth on the black market?" "I do. You know, I was shocked when I found out how my dad, and my grandfather before him, kept Ghost Moon afloat. Turns out, all you have to do to keep things going is catch a few idiots a year and then sell them." "You're a scumbag," Alex hissed. "I've known people like you, and believe me, you're idiots. Sooner or later it's going to end badly." And another naive one shook his head. "This is big business, and I don't think that a loner who wanted to play knight will be able to change anything here. Who are you anyway? It doesn't matter." Alex is having a hard time pulling herself together. "Look, if you agree to cooperate with the authorities, I'll do something to get you a better deal. You can even get out early. Yeah, and think about it. Freud's deliberately fake thinking. No, I don't like that option. Why don't we play by my rules? And all of you will handcuff yourselves quietly." And then he didn't get a chance to say anything. Something dark, big and menacing came at him from behind, and Fred's hand went up more often than not. "Get down," Alex shouted. And the bullet traveled upward, narrowly missing Bill's head. After another moment, Alex and Silax tumbled out of the van, throwing Lulu to the rescue. The sheepdog, who had gotten in the way, for some unknown canine reason, arrived just in time and quickly recognized Freddy, who was threatening his master, as a bad guy to set his teeth against. Lulu didn't eat Molly's crap at the sight of this fight, in which Fred was clearly the loser, and the pathetic party broke into nervous, hysterical laughter. Soon Bill and Alex managed to pull Fred out of the sheepdog fight, and after a couple of commands from her master, Lulu was once again a malleable, quiet dog. And then cheerful melodies, which became on the circus shrill sounds of police sirens. No one moved to the clearing, littered with cars and containers in which they stored props. Armed cops flew out. "Alex, are you even alive in here?" "Buddy, I told you to wait for me." Squeeze past them. Tall, dark-haired man. "Mike, it's okay." Here's the missing Alex waving his hand to the side, knocking the teenagers into a stand. And this is him barely keeping from kicking Fred, who was lying on the ground. That's our villain and clown. Part-time psycho. Molly stood frozen and almost out of breath. It was as if she had been transported back in time to that horrible day when she and her mom had been in the crosshairs of the police. It was as if the girl had seen it happen again. Only now she would be victimized by mistake, and maybe not even survive. No, not again. Molly wrote it down. And then, unable to stand the nervous tension, she just fainted. And the last thing she saw, about 6 days, Alex's face, concerned, sympathetic. She had something else in his gaze so warm and infinitely beautiful. "What, Molly?" Before she passed out, she smiled. What can happen and change in life in 2 years? Molly had experienced firsthand a lot of things, so much that you just find yourself in a different reality. Then, after she woke up, Alex informed her that his friend Mike had managed to get through to the local police and convinced the senior detective that something wrong was really going on at the circus. Fred did not manage to escape just punishment, and everyone was simply shocked when it turned out that he, as well as 2 of his ancestors, were engaged in such a shameful for human morality and modern society business. And then suddenly Alex told Molly that he wanted to, would take care of her, and would not accept her rejections. He bought a good wheelchair for her mom and closed the debts for social housing, and then he paid for Molly and her mom to move to another apartment. Molly was a bit shocked by this attitude. She didn't know how to react. But Alex explained it to her, and he also talked to Nancy, and she agreed that her daughter needed to study at the university, which, by the way, he also paid for. Alex had also taken care of paying for the surgery that had given Nancy back her ability to walk. And it was all about Alex finally turning 27 years old. According to his father's will, once he reached that age, he had full access to the teenage fund opened in his name. Molly decided to study to become a manager, thinking that this way, perhaps she could find a job anywhere. And when she got her diploma in 3 years, and it turned out that she could really get a good job right away. The offer came from Alex, who, as planned, still moved to Florida and opened a small restaurant there, as well as a hotel for tourists. Over the years, while Molly was studying and he was building his business, they'd seen each other often, of course. But now, when she came to see him for a few minutes, they looked at each other as if they had been apart for 100 years. And then Alex stepped toward Molly, took her face in his palms, and captured a tender yet passionate kiss on her lips. "I'm an idiot," Alex said. "I should have done this as soon as you turned 18. I was too late. Then rushed everything I should have done or said Molly, putting her hands on his shoulders. "Did you learn some kind of mind-reading trick?" He grinned. "It's more like I'm pushing you around by manipulating you into hearing what I've been wanting to hear for a long time. That's how. You're sly. But I'm willing to go along with you, but maybe we should wait. Let's make it romantic. No, let's do it now." She looked him straight in the eye. "Marry me," Alex said, and hugged her so tightly that it was hard to breathe. "I will," she said. "Oh," Molly lowered her gaze and gasped in amazement, and then sat down and picked up a fluffy furry ball in her hand. "What's this lovely thing?" "Lulu? She's decided to become a mother," Alex said. "I didn't keep track of anything." "That's just great. You shouldn't give away something so beautiful. So no sooner we're married, and you're already demanding to get another dog. Sounds like the best start to married life to me." Molly laughed. "But you have to. And you have to show me your restaurant right now. You've told me so much. I can't wait to see it with my own eyes." "You mean our restaurant?" Smiling, he took her under his arm and led her forward along the beach. By the spring of the building nearby, Lulu, the sheepdog, and her fluffy puppy were stomping their paws. Nearby, this month, he and his mom definitely need to pay off their housing debt. Social Security payments didn't cover the rent completely, and Mr. Jones, the landlord, had already hinted more than once that he wasn't a beggar's lodge. Molly grinned bitterly and gripped the shaft of her broom with naughty fingers. Who are she and her mom if they are beggars, and in a lodging house they will go if they can't start paying on time? Though the lodgings in their neighborhood were only 3 days a week at most, and then it's out to the street under the bridge. Welcome. This early morning was unusually Asian for a state bordering Mexico. Weather forecasters said the comparative proximity to the mountain range was to blame. But Molly was only glad of that, because from the sweltering and covering the town with a sweltering blanket of heat late summer smoothly flowed into fall, she was ready to howl afterward. Better they should be freezing than suffocate without air conditioning, she thought, which Mr. Jones wouldn't let any of the tenants install. After all, it would have raised his costs of maintaining the house as a whole, and thus reduced his profits. A girl in a pink tracksuit ran past Molly, white sneakers, headphones with energetic music, blonde hair bouncing on the back of her head. Molly gave her a wistfully envious look. Some people lived. She was unfamiliar with the jogger, but knew that she lived in that house, around which there was a neat lawn with a whitewashed fence. In the morning, her husband left for work in an expensive sports car, and she all day long must have had fun walking her tiny chihuahua named Princess. And anyway, Molly, gritting her teeth, in general, she was used to their poverty. But how unbearable was it to be poor when you lived next door to a prosperous, wealthy neighborhood? Such was the paradox. The house, which contained private apartments, the landlord, created by him under a special program of social housing from the state, wedged exactly killed clay bowl in the middle of the table server china into this neighborhood. And the house would have been torn down and the occupants resettled long ago. But Mr. Jones put such a multi-million-dollar price on the building that the developer's lawyers were frothing at the mouth in amazement. That's why it had to be for the good, well-mannered, and so on. Residents of this suburb to neighbor with all sorts of socially unacceptable elements that simply could not be gotten rid of now. The autumn wind flapped its invisible wing and threw golden leaves under Molly's feet. The girl energetically worked with the broom. Yes, the morning was wonderful. The sun was shining. It was Saturday on the calendar. And when Molly was still a baby, and it seemed like an eternity ago, on weekends she and her mom would go for walks in the park. And once they even went to a traveling circus. The girl forever remembered the sweet aroma of cotton candy, roasted nuts, and popcorn. Yes, she and her mom had been happy once. It seemed like the American dream was coming true. After all, what is it not a fairy tale if an ordinary orphanage wins a green card and can go to America? But Molly was born not here, but in Russia, where her father also stayed, who did not need a pregnant mistress. Molly knew. Her mother once thought that all Americans passionately need a Russian wife. And that's why, by the way, much of the meager savings that remained after the move, she spent on a marriage agency. But it turned out that there is no hype around Russian brides. And certainly no one wanted her. Nancy went to work in a factory that produced canned vegetables, mostly beans. Molly went to school, and here it was as if in compensation from fate for the first failed plans. School was fine. The other kids didn't take offense. Teachers were attentive, and learning was easy. So by the age of 10, Molly spoke English much better than her mother. She also thought about how she would go to college and everything would be fine. The teachers said she had really good prospects.